We have a special guest star with Stephanie Fitch right here, running for school board of
Ravenswood City, which is East Palo Alto and part of Menlo Park.
EPA and part of Menlo Park.
Yeah.
Excellent. So how are you doing today?
I'm doing all right.
Okay, so we have a tradition. Mm-hmm. Scott steals my introduction.
yeah.
Okay.
He's been doing it actually since the second show.
Did I?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna get him back for this one day.
Okay.
So I am Grover Reese of Guerrilla Combatives,
I am Scotty of Orc Unity.
and we have a super special guest today, and her name is.
Stephanie Fitch.
And Stephanie, why are you here?
Because you asked me to be.
Yeah, basically.
I grew up in East Palo Alto. I work in education, and I am currently running for Ravenswood City School Board.
That's
There's
excellent.
3 open spots on a 5-person board, and 9 people running, including the incumbents.
So I have a couple of questions because, first of all, people have no idea how the educational system works.
Yeah.
And it differs from state to state, of course. But what does that mean, a governing position on the school board?
So the school board, they do a lot of overseeing of like the budget and also the hiring and supervision of the superintendent. And the superintendent is a person who's kind of above the schools and observing the principals and helping them, and also dealing with the budget and whatever other issues come up with the schools. And
I always get the image of The Simpsons.
Super Nintendo Chalmers.
You know,
Yeah. That guy.
What's really hilarious is that I went to public school and I had no idea that these people even existed.
I only know they existed because I remember my principal, she'd always like, oh, the superintendent's in school. Like she would let it kind of be known. I mean, she wasn't like racing around and, like, oh, the district manager's coming. But it was definitely like, oh, the superintendent's coming.
Oh, no, I only knew the superintendent because of The Simpsons. Like, I didn't know that was a thing, like, from school, in my school. And I definitely didn't know who it was at any, like, school district I went to.
That's hilarious. So
The Simpsons.
Simpsons.
true.
Since 84, right? Or
Yep.
See, we try to be serious. It just can't happen.
We're doing our best. So
No swearing, Grover. No swearing.
I have not sworn yet. And so we wanted you on because, of course, we wanted to do something that's important to us, which is education. Regardless of what people think, my views are, whether you're a super conservative or a super liberal, I don't think anybody will say that education and childhood education isn't one of the most important things that we face and one of the biggest issues. And so thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And the thing about that, though, is, like, no one's going to say kids shouldn't be educated, but it's, like, what they're educated in where, like, the mess comes in.
100%.
One of the messes,
I think
at least.
we almost have like our own personal opinions on.
I'm super opinionated on childhood education because my education actually came after I graduated from high school, and I went back and I learned a lot of things. And one of the biggest catalysts to me understanding anything was the History Channel. Mm-hmm. So the History Channel, before they played people wrestling alligators and swamp people or whatever's on the History Channel now that I haven't watched, they had documentaries about history, and they actually would draw conclusions of, like, this is a lesson learned from history and that we're bound to repeat it again. Mm-hmm. So, I deep dives on Rome and how Rome and, like, Herod and the Bible and how these people actually existed. So, even though King Herod's in the Bible and people say the Bible may be fantasy and I don't want to get super religious, he actually did exist and is documented. He's one of the bigger villains in the Middle East at the time. So I had no idea that these things were even true or even interesting to me. So I had to actually go back and, like, put context with a lot of things I was learned and put critical thinking behind it.
Yeah, my dad was huge on critical thinking for me. Just like from day one, he was always like, you have to think for yourself. You have to think for yourself. And, you know, when I became a teenager, it was like, even if I disagree with you, and that didn't always work out.
Yeah. By the way,
it definitely like informed my teaching.
That never works out.
No, it doesn't.
Well, yeah, like how does that inform your teaching? Because when I think of teachers, I always think of structure, standardized testing. Everything has to be a certain way.
Ew. No, man. You needed me as a teacher then.
When I think of teachers, I think of Mrs. French, who told me I've been teaching for 45 years, and I literally, in 5th grade, caught her drinking vodka in class. And Mrs. French would drink vodka and pass out.
Tenure. Well, I mean, that's what professors do.
No, teachers get tenure too.
Oh.
Yeah.
And it does, like, make it harder to fire teachers who are not doing their job as well as we would want for our young people.
Yeah. I mean, she was like 785 years old, so I wouldn't have felt good firing a 900.
But like, who are you going to get to replace that position? Because like, no one's becoming teachers anymore.
And this comes to the questions I want. You are awesome, because I wanted to ask you some questions. Like, first,
Let's go.
One question that I wanted to ask is like, why would anybody become a teacher if there's such more lucrative careers out there?
So you want me to tell you about how I got into being a teacher?
Word.
Okay, so I grew up.
Hold on. Nobody says word anymore. Yes, please.
They don't?
Nah, it's old people.
Oh, then maybe I should stop.
Do you say word?
Sometimes.
Oh, cool.
All right. So.
You're always welcome here.
Okay, story time. I grew up in East Palo Alto, right? And this was in the 80s. And
Shoot 'em up, East Palo Alto.
oh, yes, like gunshots every night and highest murders per capita in the country at the time. You know, and I'm just like this little kid, like la la la.
Dangerous
you know?
Minds, Michelle Pfeiffer.
Yep. Yeah. Oh, everybody rocked out to the song on the bus. But
Coolio, I'm going to put that up.
We're going to get pulled
hey, that's
instantly.
a jam. That's a
9
jam.
seconds and it will be okay.
Yeah. Crispin and Wilson. All right. Oh, gosh, this is horrible.
I think that's remarkable because we're just going to your origin story, and
Oh, yeah.
the setting, the environment is important.
It is, because it does like inform like where I was coming from, you know,
Yeah.
and it like part of it too is like growing up in East Palo Alto. Well, I was also half white and half Filipino, and looking Mexican, and everybody thinking I'm Mexican, and you know trying to talk to me, and I'm like no hablo español, and then they get mad and don't believe me. Why don't you know your culture? That's not my culture.
Full disclosure.
Yeah.
I hella thought you were Mexican.
Oh yeah, no,
Oh, she's wearing a.
read this.
No. I'm talking about when I first met her. I was like, who the new Mexican girl?
Yeah.
You're racist.
What? How dare you? Anyway, please continue. I'm sorry.
No, it's good, but like there's like this identity crisis, right, of being biracial and nothing
During
that's
that time,
around
yeah.
you, and then like also not like living in one city and going to school in another city, right?
Oh, were you a Carmont kid too?
No, so I did the Tinsley program, right? But I went into the Palo Alto schools. So I was bused into the Palo Alto schools starting first grade. Kindergarten, I went to Flood, and I already knew how to read from this preschool that I went to. I learned how to read when I was like 4, and yeah, it was like a private preschool, but my parents could not afford that. So I went to Flood, and the teacher's like, wow, you're one of the 2 kids in here that can read. Your parents should check out this Tinsley program. So they're like, all right, we don't know. Because my mom's coming fresh from the Philippines, and my dad was like a generation older. So he didn't know what was going on either. So they're like, all right, fine. Throw me into the Palo Alto schools, and, you know, I'm doing okay. But elementary school, I went to Walter Hayes. It was stressful. Like, I think I got burnt out in school in 5th grade.
And why was it stressful?
It's just so much work to do, you know, and it became work. Like, learning should be fun. Learning is fun, right? And like a lot of the things that you can do in school are fun, you know. Like I remember like 4th grade, we had this like we were learning about the gold rush, right? And we reenacted gold rush, and it's fun. And that's like why I remember the gold rush, is because we did the gold rush.
Right.
You know, we were part of it. But like just the amount of reading we had to do, the essays, and then also the stress of like going back home. and that being so far and taking that bus with everybody singing Gangster's Paradise like at the top of their lungs every day.
That was a jam.
Yeah, it was. But after like the 5th day of everyone like losing their minds out of it, I'm just like, I'm done. I can't. Like,
I gotta say also that one Batman Forever song by Seal. That one.
Kiss from a Rose on the
Yeah,
Rose.
that was. I remember it. Those are the same
Scott was hella soft, dude. Scott,
don't know why.
she's singing Gangster's Paradise. You're singing Kiss
It's
from
like
a Rose on
Tupac.
the
Like,
Rose.
what was that song? The
I sang that song
Rose
too.
going through concrete or something.
that's a poem
That
by
was a
Tupac.
poem.
yeah, there we go. See?
Don't try to clean it up. Don't try to clean it up.
Bay Area.
Don't try to clean it up. All right,
Homegrown.
Did you go to Carmont?
I did.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's where that came from.
yeah.
Yeah.
I went to South City. Yeah.
Well, I mean,
South City and El Camino.
that's like definitely a little bit of a side history on the peninsula side, how East Palo Alto kids were bused into Carmont, which
Yeah.
Belmont from East Palo Alto is about 15 miles away.
Mm-hmm.
So imagine that.
Yeah.
From East Palo Alto next to the shoreline, all the way up into the hills of Belmont.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't even know understood how they even picked that school.
Right.
Yeah.
So like going to
'Cause
Palo Alto
schools.
schools kind of made sense because they were right there.
yeah.
But it's still so jarring for these kids. You know, and this is back when Palo Alto was not what it is today. Like the houses in Palo Alto were not hundreds of thousands of dollars, let
Right.
alone millions.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like the
100%.
houses in East Palo Alto now are more expensive than the houses in Palo Alto were back then.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, the houses in East Palo Alto now are super expensive,
Super expensive.
and I think that's
They got
another.
an IKEA right there.
And once IKEA's in town,
No, IKEA's been there though. It's that Facebook traffic that's got everyone going through
actually,
it.
IKEA was the anchor retail that kind of started redoing IKEA and Best Buy. Were anchor
Home Depot.
retails. No, yeah, and Home Depot. So you have those three things. They call it anchor retail, and then you start redeveloping around that. There was a huge redevelopment in East Palo Alto.
So that area though, where those stores popped up, that's where Ravenswood High School used to be, and East Palo Alto has not had a public high school since the 1970s.
Wow.
And that's when it shut down. And that area was just empty for decades until like Home Depot and IKEA and
we
all
actually
that
we
built it
actually
up.
used to call that area the shooting gallery.
Yeah, I believe that.
So my East Palo Alto story is I met a beautiful, beautiful lady in East Palo Alto, and I would go down to see her, and after almost dying several times, I had to tell her that she was geographically undesirable, and she didn't like that.
No,
But
no, you don't say that.
hey, at one point I had to take care of me. I was scared for my life.
Mate.
And I don't care. Oh, you soft. I was like, they was shooting. I remember I came out one day. I had a little bucket. I drove down there. I actually think I took my mom's Monte Carlo and drove it down there. And then I came out and my tires were gone. But and that's just like, I was like,
Did you have a bus pass at least?
dude, I walked hella far to El Camino, took the bus, then I got my boy and we went back, and I was like, man, I just hope the car ain't us. Because, in my mind, the car was going to be like a skeleton on fire. And we get back there, and my boy threw some tires on my car, and I drove it home. And he was like, dude, don't ever come down here by yourself.
Meanwhile, I was like walking to the
Walking
library
around.
by myself,
Yeah,
like going
yeah,
to
like-
McDonald's for a McFlurry.
5-year-olds.
Yeah.
Okay, so I also kind of like looked in your history a little bit, and we
Ooh.
are still going to your origin story.
It's a scenic journey. It's a scenic journey.
We'll-
Like my origin story is a scenic journey. We're taking a scenic journey through it.
We'll
It's
get to
good.
it one day.
One day. But definitely, like looking at your credentials, you were educated in the Bay Area, but at prestigious schools. I'm not going to say the names because I'll let you do that. But these schools are known not to accept in-state students.
Yeah.
And,
really?
From what I've heard, at
It's
least.
pretty hard to be an in-state student. and get
But
accepted.
definitely, you came from EPA, became an educator in EPA.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Like you could have gone anywhere, but you went back home.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, it's a scenic journey to get there. So, like, okay, going to these Palo Alto schools, right? Burning out for the first time in 5th grade. Middle school is a hot mess for anybody, let alone, this little half brown girl going to the white schools coming from the brown hood, And And, there's like family issues too, and you're just trying to figure yourself out, and your body's exploding in all these weird ways. No one knows what's going on in middle schoolers.
Exactly.
I want to thank every single middle schooler teacher out there, because like I picked high school. I taught high school. That was fine. Some people think that's scary. No, it's great. I think it's great. You can talk and be real with those kids. Whereas middle schoolers, they have no idea what's going on.
Yeah.
And I don't know how to handle that. Like little kids are, they got their imaginations going. They're fine. But middle schooler, I don't. Bless everybody who works with them.
Explosion of hormones, like I would say the peak of it,
Yeah,
going to the peak. Yeah.
Well, I don't think it's quite the peak of it, but there's a lot of confusion.
I think the start of it is confusing. When you're in high school, you still have the hormones going nuts, but you're a little more used to it. You're like, oh yeah, I'm going through these crazy changes. We're in middle school. You're like, oh, I don't know what's going on. Like,
I think middle school is especially harder for little girls than for boys. I remember some of my friends were like, we used to play together and hang out, in like 6th grade, and then all of a sudden in 7th grade I was like, hey, you changing. And they're like, shut up, Grover. And I was like, oh, you don't like it when I say that? Because you haven't, like, I was still kind of clueless, and then all of a sudden, like a year and a half later, I was like, oh, that was horrible. And so
but I mean, when adults aren't talking to you about this and like telling you what's going on to begin with, kids are gonna make those mistakes. They're gonna like say these things and then like decades later be able to be like, oh,
lady, my generation adults wasn't talking about nothing.
I know, but we're trying to change that. We're trying to get better, you know?
Yeah, definitely. So middle school.
So, and then I went to Palo Alto High School for high school.
PA High School.
And I hated it.
Yeah,
that's part of why I became a high school teacher.
They had Palo Alto High School, they had a good jazz band.
Okay, I believe you.
I played in jazz band.
So okay, I don't know.
Okay.
I played flute in middle school.
Yeah, you was going through so many changes, you just let that go, huh?
Almost literally, like I was at the mall with some friends and I was like, watch my flute. I'm going to go in this store. And I came back out and they were gone and so was my flute. And then I found my friends. I was like, where's my flute? And they're like, you're what? And I'm like, there goes that $500 instrument my parents couldn't afford to begin with.
Ooh, yeah, no.
So I stopped playing flute.
Yeah.
I was actually more interested in theater and photography. So in high school, I did theater.
Well, that's theater.
Because I wanted to be an actress to begin with.
It's awesome. I wanted to be an actress. And look at you on the
camera
on
and
the big
all that.
podcast right now, just shining.
Okay, but see, the problem was that like I wanted to do TV and film though, and like at Pali there was theater, and all these theater kids had gone to plays and like knew show tunes, and like they're like singing these show tunes. I'm in the corner with my headphones listening to like Eminem and Dr. Dre. I have no idea what those guys are doing, but I know I wanted to be an actress too.
Right.
But I'm not fitting in with that crowd because I don't have that exposure to Broadway. Like I don't, I've heard of it. I don't know what that is though. So like there's lots of places where like I didn't fit in Pali, and there were some great teachers at Pali. I saw them. I saw my friends taking their classes, but I was not taking those classes. I had a world history teacher who the course was world history, but we learned about Europe and China. And that's it. And I asked them, I was like, hey, like when are we going to learn about like African countries or like Australia? I don't know anything about Australia. That'd be cool. And like, I'm Filipino. I know nothing about the Philippines. Like I've never seen myself or my culture in my education. And we're like the second or third largest group of Asians in this country.
Second largest group of Asians.
Yeah, we're everywhere.
Daly City is the second biggest city of Filipinos.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Behind Manila.
Which is crazy.
Yeah.
Hot to cold.
But they don't teach you about us.
We got Filipino facts just to spout.
Yeah, because no one else is teaching them to anybody, So like we got to represent it ourselves. But anyway, so I'm calling this teacher out, and I'm like, hey, when are we gonna learn about these other countries? And I'm like, when are we gonna learn about Middle Eastern countries? And he was just like, oh, they're not as important. You don't need to know about those. But then like I grew up as an adult. What are the countries being mentioned on the news? Where's the conflict happening? Where's like the most relevant issues of today happening? They're happening in those countries that I never got to learn about.
Thus, one of my opinions for education comes in.
Yeah.
And so I think that it's almost purposeful that certain parts of the world aren't mentioned. And it's just ironic that these parts of the world that people don't know about have all the conflict.
Well, it's
So
also
there's,
like
I'm sorry to interrupt.
no, there's this like
Go on and take over. It's your podcast.
Well, I mean, this is how this teacher was taught too, though. You know, so it's this like trickle down from like generations trying to do the same thing.
100%.
But like you need to not do the same thing anymore. So there's this concept called the decolonization of curriculum, right? And that's something that like he needed to do. He needed to decolonize his curriculum because the colonizers, just because like they're the ones who wrote the history, doesn't mean that they have the most important history and the only history we should learn. You know, so like that's something that like I care a lot about is like making sure that kids see themselves in their education and that you see other people you've never even heard of in your education. You need to know what all these things are.
Well, I mean, but you can also do that with American education because every major group that lives in this country has contributed miles and miles of information, miles and miles of great things. And the biggest thing is that, like, we literally had to get that in the early 80s from, like, rap music. So it was like KRS-One, Public Enemy. These are the people that made me want to go to college, made me want to read more. Because, like, we weren't ever going to hear about Malcolm X.
I'm writing a project using his book right now. That's one of my favorite books to teach is his autobiography.
The Autobiography of Malcolm X, because it's a redemption story. It's a story about somebody who goes one way and as a man who changes his point of view.
Yeah.
And that's very important.
Yes.
But like I read the Autobiography of Malcolm X because Public Enemy said you should start reading about black leaders besides Martin Luther King. So I said, well, who else is besides Martin Luther King? I think there's this guy named Malcolm X, and I just picked it up and I read it. But I wouldn't have never knew about anything like that. And then there's a song by KRS-One called "You Must Learn," and he went through about 25 black inventors who did things, you know, and by name, and like a lot of research. It was almost like a research paper, and I thought to myself, like, wow.
I need to write a project for that. Like, write your research paper this time will be written in rap form.
Yeah, I mean,
something creative too.
Yeah.
To engage.
It was just absolutely amazing because when you drop those facts on people, they were real facts. It wasn't like he was just rhyming some words together.
Or mumbling them together.
Yeah.
Let's not get into mumble rappers.
Lord help us.
I'm sorry, I'm an English teacher.
Rainbow
Like,
hair and everything.
I can't with it.
It just bothers. God, I'm so happy that there's still real rappers out there that I can listen to that don't just. When did they come out with that?
I don't know.
So
high school.
high school.
So I hated it.
Hated high school.
So I hated high school. I was so stressed out, and like teenagers are so stressed out. Like
Yeah.
they really are. There's just too much happening on them. And at Palo Alto High School, which is across the street from Stanford, it's like you have to go to Stanford or better. And to me, I'm like, I'm not going to college.
It was like that.
Damn.
Yeah. That's what it felt like.
Couldn't
That's
go
what
to
it
San
felt
Jose
like.
State.
I mean, like people definitely do, but just like the pressure that's coming into you. Like whenever I ask the teacher, like, why are we doing this? You know, not why are we learning this, but like this activity, this homework, this worksheet you gave me.
Right.
Why am I doing this? And the only answers they ever gave me were so you can get good grades, go to good college, and get a good job. And so I'd be like, but I want to be an actress. I don't need this. Or like, I want to be a mechanic. Like I can go to trade school. I don't need this.
Right.
And those were the two things that I wanted to become when I was in high
A
school.
mechanic and an actress.
That's
Close. That's really close, right?
That's a contrast. I don't know about contrast.
Right by
but
each other.
Sure.
And whenever I think actress or actor, I think mechanic.
There are like acting mechanics.
Acting mechanics, yeah.
Or mechanics that need us.
My dad used to act like a mechanic.
So okay, like being an actress, that was something I wanted to do since I was like a little kid.
Yes, ma'am.
And then when I was like 16, my dad was always into cars, and he was always working on cars,
Right.
As a hobby, not his job. And we didn't always get along, but one of the things where we could bond over was cars. So he taught me, like, my first car was his old 82 Toyota Celica that had a rod knock. And he was like, if you pay for a new engine and help me install it, you can have a car. So I'm like, sign me up. So, like, I don't really know what we were doing, but he'd be like, all right, this is this thing. Okay, unwrench this thing, you know. and it was great. I loved it. I was like, I could totally do this. Like, this is fun. I think I had this vision of like opening up an all women's mechanic shop and then teaching women like free classes so they could feel more confident with cars and dealing with cars, and I feel like they're not getting ripped
I would
off.
have always taken my car to the all-woman mechanic shop.
Oh yeah, they have them now though. Like, people are always sending me articles like, oh, look at this woman, she opened up her mechanic shop, and like there's a lot of them out there now.
And there's guys around the corner because they're pigs. Anyway,
No, they're hating on them.
get out of here, for real.
Yes, of course. They're like, women don't know what they're talking about.
Okay, so I thought that in this day and age that it was over for guys like hating on women who do stuff. I think that's kind of dumb.
Oh no.
I mean, yeah.
I mean, like I've been there's been times when I'm like off the side of the road changing my tire. Right, it was flat. I'm changing it, and like there's one time I had a flat tire and I happened to be in front of like an auto zone or something. Mm-hmm. Clearly, like, I'm not struggling. Like, I know what I'm doing. I'm getting it done. And of course, every single guy that walked, do you need help with that? Do you know what help? Do I look like I need help? Because I'm doing it.
Damn, maybe somebody
They're just
wanted to
practicing
help
chivalry.
you. Well, what if someone just wanted to help? I ask people if they need help for stuff. See, no, you know what? Oh, no. We gonna get this. That kills me because when I try to be nice, sometimes I get treated like a redheaded stepchild in an all African house. So
look. I was polite to them to their faces. Like, no, I'm good. No, thank you. I'm good.
Beat them up when they walked away for trying to be nice.
It just became frustrating because like I knew if I was a dude, they wouldn't be asking me at this level. There might be an occasional guy who would out of that politeness, but it wouldn't be every single guy.
Man, I ask anybody if I see that they have their hands full, do you need a little help?
In her defense, I bet you about 66% of those guys were trying to hit on her in a different kind of way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you don't disagree with me on that?
No, absolutely not. Why would I disagree?
But
with
see,
that?
that's also like why I have that like built-in like reaction already. Like, I know that that's what they want.
But,
no, I'm good. I know what I'm doing, and I'm getting it done.
But
we do have to hit intermission pretty soon.
Intermission time. How far do we at?
We got like this says 27 minutes, but I'm sure that one might cut out quicker.
All right, so why don't we take an intermission while I will come back and get roasted? I will get roasted by Stephanie for my opinion of helping people.
We're at the We're at the Palo Alto High School story too.
Oh yeah.
Palo Alto High School story.
I'm keeping.
Yeah, but you know what was dope though? He was like, "We're at the Palo." We're at the Palo Alto. He was so close, dude.
See, we try to be serious. It's just
We're doing our best.
We're doing our best. There's no swearing so far.
Intermission time. 1, 2, 3, boom, and we are back with the wonderful, the magnificent, the changing her own tire with no man's help.
We can't call her Mrs. Fitch.
We
It's
call her
Miss
Ms.
Fitch.
Fitch. So, what I was saying, that sometimes, yes, when a guy comes up and offers help or something, he's trying to maybe be interested and talk to you, but that's not. If somebody's not aggressive, if someone's polite, then it's not a bad thing.
It's not, but so many women and so many times we encounter being polite back and getting harassment back from being polite and saying no. So, and we never know. You never know who's going to be that guy.
So
You can't tell.
So just shoot all the guys.
Yeah.
Just chop our heads off. Just throw us off a bridge.
Leave me alone.
Yeah.
You got to play hard to get, you know.
Yeah.
It works both ways.
So you know
apparently.
what's hilarious is that I have an apartment complex and my neighbor's this lady from Beijing, I think, and she's married to a friend of mine. And I didn't, when I first met them because they parked by me, she would have a bunch of groceries and I'd be like, oh, you want me to help you with that? She's like, no. I was like, all right. And I just go upstairs and I see her with a bunch of groceries. One day, like her car door is open. So I look at her thing and I said, that's going to be loud. And I said, hey, your car door is open. And she doesn't even open the door. And I'm like, this lady probably thinks I'm stalking her, but her car door is open. Like, do you want to leave your car door open? And so finally I see her and I'm like, listen, when I ask you if you want help, it's not because I'm trying. You got 13 bags of groceries, lady. And I figured maybe you need a little help to carry it in because you're by yourself. Or just opening the door or something. But I'm not trying to do anything. And I said, and you left your door open. And it was open for hours. I mean, it's your car. You do whatever you want with it. But, like, I'm not trying anything. Sometimes people are just trying to be humans, and I think that is my biggest problem with the world today. Is that we all want people to be good Samaritans and be polite and do the right thing, but 9 times out of 10, men and women, when they do the right thing, they get slapped. So like if the nice thing is like, hey, you want some help, and the right thing for you, the nice thing for you say, oh, no, thank you.
No,
you
thank
know,
you,
I got
I'm
this.
fine.
And then it's like, then
And that's it.
and then you get slapped down
That's
with
fine.
like, well, you don't do that. It's like, nah, dude, I don't, you put your shoulders away, dude. I don't need your help, with your toupee or whatever's going on. But like, I remember like, I did something polite for someone, and they were like, and walked by me, and I was like, I should have let this door hit you in the face. Like, I held the door open for you because you had your hands full.
Yeah.
And I was being polite, And so my thing is like, yes, 9 times out of 10, if a guy's being nice to you, they may want to talk to you, they may want to get to know you, but they may have also just was raised right.
And like the thing is, like the problem is that's too rare, and that's why. No, I'm serious. I'm so serious. That is what the problem is. Because if that was the expectation that people are just nice to each other, this wouldn't be a problem at all, And if people knew not to expect things from things, like if we didn't have this like.
No, there is definitely an expectation principle that people have inherently.
But I don't think nobody expects that if they like hold the door open for you, they're gonna get something else.
But
I think it
like,
leads you basically when it's almost like a metaphor where you open the door and it's kind of like you're opening to have your foot in the door. Opening that interaction.
Look at you with the metaphors and the figurative language here.
Metaphysical Scott.
Tupac, Eminem.
Hold on a second. Let me I gotta. This is my. It's time for me to make fun of Scott. It's like you're opening the door, and you're trying to open the door.
This is bullying right here.
And dude says it like he thought that was super deep. It was.
Hey, let him try out his metaphors.
Hey, you know what? You guys keep talking because I got to make sure our backup mic's on.
Oh, this is awesome. You know what's awesome about the Happiness Podcast is that something bad happens every single time. Like one of our podcasts we were shooting, and I did like a whole segment with my microphone off.
Good job.
Yeah. Let's just say I was altered a little that day.
So high school.
High school,
Palo Alto?
Yeah.
Palo Alto High School.
Across from Stanford.
Yeah,
No,
so-
that was
Across
junior
from
high
Stanford,
school.
yeah.
Across from Stanford.
Yeah, so I hated high school. So my parents saw this and they're like, well, maybe we could find something else, So we tried to look at alternative programs and alternative schools.
Wow,
And
so your parents were actually willing to like, so they were invested in your future and your
yeah, no,
happiness.
like I'm very, very blessed to have parents who definitely supported me and, like were always telling me like, yeah, you can do it. Like and giving me that positive encouragement.
That's cool. And you said earlier that your dad was from an older generation?
Yeah, he was. And he was from an older generation, but he still I think because he had such a tough childhood growing up during the Depression. He was born in October 1929.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. The
So-
20th actually. So he would have been 89 this coming Saturday.
Okay. Wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well,
But he was very
happy heavenly birthday.
Yeah, he was very liberal and forward thinking in a lot of ways though. So he did believe in saying I love you and showing affection to your family, and these were things he did not get at all.
Especially
in his
during that time
childhood.
period.
Yeah.
What generation is that called?
That's the greatest generation.
Were they though?
We're 1920. Well,
Yeah.
he was born 1929?
Born
Yeah.
in 29, so he was
That was
a
the greatest generation?
World War
Yeah,
II
that
veteran.
was the
Greatest
great. Okay,
generation,
yeah.
Yeah. You're like, and were they?
No, they were.
well, it was
definitely tough.
It was,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I mean,
Made some hardy
let's
people.
being born into depression, going straight into World War II. That's then Korean War right after that. That's some hard scrapple people.
yeah. Yeah.
They could be backward socially and awkward and but still
He
you got
wasn't
your
as
system.
backwards socially as his potential upbringing could have made him.
Oh, so he
He was pretty forward thinking. He was kind of a hippie. I grew up on brown rice and steamed vegetables and soy milk before that was a big thing.
really.
Yeah.
Wow. That's weird.
I hate brown rice and soy milk.
Yeah. So. All right, teach.
Yeah. So
So you go.
we were looking at like alternative programs,
Yeah.
and you know, he was even like suggesting this like private school that like I knew my parents could not afford this, and I'm like that can't be a thing. And I finally found this program called middle college. Have you heard of middle college?
I've
So-
heard,
Middle college
Yeah,
before.
so middle college, if you don't know, what it is it's an alternative high school program. You're with a bunch of other middle college students from different high schools. So I think it was like Gun, Pali, Mountain View, and we all went to Foothill Community College. So in the morning we had our middle college like humanities class.
Right.
So the junior class was 30 kids with this teacher Paula, and the senior class was 60 kids with two teachers, Mike and Seth, and they went by their first names. And then in the afternoons and maybe even evenings, you would take community college classes to make up your other credits. So it was a really interesting mix of kids, because there were the kids who were like super behind, and then the kids who really wanted to get ahead. And we were all mushed into this one room. And it was great. It was a great experience. It saved my life. To me, it saved my life.
That's amazing, because I have heard middle college for people who were like super behind and they were able to catch up.
Oh, yeah.
But a lot of times I thought that people who went to middle college and the people who were super behind were behind not because of their failings, but because of the school's failings.
Yeah, and that was kind of some of the issues. Like in high school, there were a lot of times where like I was bored. You know, like I didn't see the value in what we were doing. I was bored. I didn't know why we were learning anything, so I didn't want to learn it. Whereas like at community college, I took creative writing, I took psychology, I took intro to MIDI, electronic music. I took astronomy instead of physics. You know, like you had so many more options, and it made it way more interesting to me. And 1 quarter at Foothill equals 1 year at high school.
And
So let's say you
that's
need to take
awesome.
Spanish.
Yeah.
You can take 3 years of Spanish in 1 year at Foothill.
Yeah.
And so like that's how those kids caught up, and that's how like some kids, if you planned out, I did not plan, you could graduate high school with an AA degree. That was not me. But I was the like, I'm going to explore classes, but
But so it kind of, this is very interesting, because I loved that concept in general. How old were you when you went there?
16.
16.
So that's junior and senior year.
It's exactly my theory, and which I'll talk about it later, but I want to get to your experience. But I have a whole theory of education. If I had a magic wand, I would change things.
Ooh, I do want to hear this.
Yeah. So you graduate.
So yeah, I did graduate. I did get a Palo Alto High School diploma, but like we had like our own middle college graduation, and you know, like I'm trying to figure out like, well, what do I want to do with my life? And I decided like, well, I want to be educated. Like I want to know things about the world.
Right.
And part of it was, you know, like in this middle college program, our projects were a lot more creative, and we read books that weren't just the like old dead white guy books. Some of them, but like not all of them. And so I was like, well, you know, like I want to know more about just kind of like the books that like everybody knows, all the things that are always referenced in Illusions and, you know, in pop culture even. And like the first few seasons of The Simpsons, there's so many like literary and historic references in there that like if you don't know them, you don't catch.
So let's stop.
And yeah, I'm
everything
going
for
back
1
to The
second.
Simpsons again.
You know, I never thought that we would be talking about The Simpsons so much. Let's continue.
Child of the 90s, child of the 90s, you know, child of the 80s and 90s, you know. I grew up learning like everything from The Simpsons and Seinfeld, so
Yeah. I never watched the episode of Seinfeld until it was off the air.
what'd you think?
I thought there was no black people on Seinfeld.
No, there's not.
I was like, why am I gonna watch Seinfeld? I didn't watch Seinfeld or Friends. Don't look like my friends. No, but that's super cool. So you decided to be, you wanted to be.
I wanted to be
educated.
educated, yeah. So I kept taking classes at Foothill Community College. I was first thinking about going to UC Santa Cruz. I wanted to go to like a local college, but then I found this program in Santa Fe, New Mexico called St. John's College, and they're based on the great books. And my dad went to the University of Chicago, so he's huge into liberal arts education. And this program there's no textbooks, there's no lectures. You learn the things the way that people who first learned them. So instead of like having a math textbook, we had Euclid's proofs, and we did Euclidean proofs. Instead of learning biology textbook, they gave you a dead cat and you figured out how it worked.
Wow.
Which was gross, and I hated that part.
Yeah.
That was not me.
I was with you until the dead cat.
Yeah. So I was only at that school for one semester.
Yeah, that dead cat chased you right out, huh?
You know what? That and the like ancient Greek that we had to learn. But also they had this, you didn't have teachers or professors, you had tutors. So they do this weird thing. One, you can't transfer in. Everybody who comes in, you start as a freshman. So all my college credits didn't count for anything because you have to take the 4 years because the classes are all set. You don't pick classes. It's just like, this is what you take. There's 400 people at the school.
Yeah.
Like, it's very, very small and very, very weird.
Yeah.
Everybody there is so weird.
Little cultish, huh?
They hadn't experienced as much of the world as I feel like I had, even though I hadn't traveled outside of the country.
You're like,
much.
they haven't experienced as much of the world as I had, and I was 18.
Yeah.
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 So you left there after a semester?
I left there after a semester. I was really frustrated with the fact that our tutors, when you're a new tutor there, you tutor classes that you're not necessarily an expert in. So my math teacher had no idea what Euclid was talking about. Like, I taught my math class, and I'm not a math person. But she was fluent in like multiple languages, including ancient Greek.
So why wasn't she teaching languages?
Greek teacher did not know Greek.
But he was good at math.
I don't know what he was good at.
Oh.
He was a nice guy. Apparently, he was a lawyer. He seemed smart in a lot of ways, but it was just really frustrating to me that they had that set up. And then also we had this class called seminar, and we read pretty much everything Plato wrote, and we would discuss it. And
That sounds pretty cool.
that sounds great, right? This is like part of what drew me to the program, but they didn't want you to reference things outside of the text because not necessarily everyone had read that book you're trying to bring in or anything like that. And I'm like, well, what's the point of reading these old texts if you're not going to apply them to your life now?
That's like boxed in thinking
It
of
is.
people from the past.
Right?
Yeah.
So I'm like, what's even the point of reading this if we're not going to apply it to what's happening now? And what's the point of having these conversations with each other if we're not going to share the experiences and the different things we have read to like let people know, like, hey, I read this one book. Kid across the room is like, oh, I'm gonna read that later. And like they wouldn't have never found that book if it wasn't for that discussion they had from this person who came from such a different life than them. Like, that's the whole reason why you have discussions, right? And I was just like, you know what? This is also a waste of my time. Like, if this is how you're going to do it, this is not right for me, you know? And I'm sure it worked out for other people, but like the closest friends that I made there, they left too. Another one of them left at the end of the semester. The other one left at the end of the year. And, you know, like one example I have from her, she grew up in Orange, one of my friends, she grew up in Orange County, and, you know, she had family members who like had some rough backgrounds and rough lives. And when there was, I can't remember if it was Socrates or Plato, but this, you know, some philosopher saying like a criminal's punishment should just be like basically getting away with it. Like, if you steal money, your punishment is that you have to live with the guilt of spending that money that you didn't earn. And like, you have these 18-year-old kids in class being like, oh yeah, that's a great idea. Meanwhile, like, she has an uncle in prison. She's like, no, that is not a good idea. That is not how this works. Like, that does not show anyone anything, right? So like if you're gonna learn things outside of life, I don't get why you're learning them. You know, like it's good to know things, but if you can't apply them to your life, why?
And honestly, that's why I got really bored with the educational system.
Yeah.
I'm a B average student. Never applied myself because I was always bored in classes.
CEOs are all
the
C
time.
students.
Really? You were a C student?
No, I wasn't. CEOs, though.
CEOs, okay.
CEOs were not A+ students. They were the C students.
And it's just kind of crazy. It's like, I had a thirst for knowledge. It's just I didn't understand what that thirst was until later on in life. I'm like, oh, this is stuff I'm interested in. What the hell, you know? But
So like the traditional educational model, you don't get to explore your interests unless they happen to be those subjects. And even within those subjects, you might not necessarily see people like you in them, and you might not necessarily understand how you're applying it to your life, you know, right now or later. And I don't like that. I don't like that.
Well, I mean, that's just one of the things that made me search out education is, well, going places and like seeing actually religious texts that were written differently. You know, like all the Bibles in Ethiopia have Black Jesus, and I'm like, what?
You mean Jesus?
Yeah.
Technically, he had was it golden skin and hair of wool?
Hair of lamb's wool.
Lamb's wool.
Sounds like an afro to me. But, no, but you know, like growing up and always seeing an image of something that's totally different, and then when it didn't make me like question this or that. It just made me say, what else is hidden? So that was always my ideal. So that's interesting.
So after St. John's, actually, I came back home.
Yeah.
I had enough of Santa Fe. And I went to Santa Clara University. And Santa Clara, it's a Jesuit university. And at first my dad's like, you're going to Catholic school, like, oh, religion, blah. But like the thing about yeah.
He's doing a Millie Rock.
Not so much. But the thing about Jesuit universities is like the Jesuits, they're about that knowledge. They're about like, you know what? Okay, read the Quran, you know, read everything, read all of these things. Because like if their religion, if that's the truth, you will find it once you've read everything else. So they're kind of like trusting you with knowing and trusting you to be a smart enough person to make your own decisions. So like, but to make your own decisions, you need to learn, you need to know things. So here's all the information, you go out and make what you will with it. And I really respect that about the Jesuits. And at Santa Clara, I had to take a class on the Bible, and their approach to teaching it was historical, and you know, like it was very like informative in that way. And I really they taught it like a piece of historical literature.
What I've noticed, well, this is just from my personal experience, but both my brothers went to USF, which is a Jesuit school, and Santa Clara University, which is also not religious at. I mean, yeah, like they'll explore, dabble, whatever, but it was never like a thing. But there was definitely a lot of critical thinking.
Exactly, and that's the thing. It's like I think a good practice of religion, or not even religion, but just anything, you need to be able to think critically about it. You know, you need to be able to take in information, process it, question it, and share that information and come up with your own ideas and know how to share those things. And that's why I like teaching English, because that's like all English is like reading, thinking, writing, speaking, listening.
And explaining your point of view.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But also critical thinking is understanding what's being said. And I think that's without a doubt the biggest issue that I have is like people read things and don't reading something and taking it at face value and not understanding either what's it implying. Because if you really read things and understood what it's implying, like memes kill me. Memes are the worst things in history. I wish memes were never invented. They're not even funny anymore. They're just false equivalencies. You know, poor intellectual laziness.
I've seen some Instagram posts where I'm just like, that's not correct. They're like, that's a misquote. Wait, did you steal that quote? Why are you making that your quote?
And the favorite thing that really challenges anyone's critical thinking is that when they put someone like an actor or someone intelligent or Einstein or someone who just looks like, everyone loves to put Morgan Freeman or Patrick Stewart on something because they look like old, like smart people.
It's Professor X, man.
Yeah, Jean-Luc Picard. Star Trek, Jean-Luc Picard. You're too young.
No, I used to watch it. I used to binge watch that one.
Yeah,
I don't understand it.
I watched it on the first run. But like they sit there and it's like, why is this and this and this? And I'm like, the person in the picture didn't say it. But that picture is almost adding value and legitimacy to it.
Optics.
Yeah, and it's like, if you're not a critical thinker,
You gotta cite your sources, man.
you're gonna take that at well, I mean, it's funny and this guy's on it. It has nothing to do. I can have a picture of Jesus saying something. It doesn't make Jesus said it. You know, and so it's every time I see something from someone I know, someone I know personally who's putting up something that's just like intellectually laziness, I challenged them on it instantly. And they're like, and my friends always say the same thing. Well, I put that up there because of, no, you put that up there because you were lazy. If you wanted to write out, well, isn't this like this and like this, you would have wrote out, isn't this like this or this. But I challenged you on it, and now you're backtracking. Either stand by what you put up, so I can call you intellectually lazy and dishonest and make fun of you for years, or don't put it up. But it's not, like, one thing that critical thinking teaches you is that it's not your responsibility to vet what I put up. It's my responsibility to vet what I put up. It's your responsibility to call me out for not vetting what I put up. And so I like critical thinking because it's one of the few places where you could be creative and confrontational at the same time. That's why.
Yeah, and like in English too, like I like teaching it because you're teaching kids how to communicate with one another too, and like it's really key to give them those phrases on how to respectfully disagree. And like some of my best classes are the ones where we're all yelling at each other, right? Because we're so into what we're arguing about, and we care. Yeah, it's like I've sparked that passion in them, and like when a kid gets like excited about learning something, to the extent that they're like yelling across the room to the other kid, like why they're wrong, and they're like, using quotes and like spelling it out. I'm like, that kid's learning right now.
Right there.
If you walk into this classroom and you don't know anything about education or like what's going on, you're gonna be like, why are these kids yelling at each other? But if you know what you're looking for, you're gonna see like, oh man, look at that kid. He's like using this text, and that kid's bringing up a different point, and that kid's referencing this kid's point.
It's like ideas and ideas.
Yeah. But you have to teach kids how to do that.
You walk in from the outside and be like, Miss Fitch ain't got no control over nothing. This woman don't. I don't want my kids.
I always did, and everybody knew it. Mostly because I was louder than the kids.
Let's just face it, you were mean.
Yeah. No, I'm not even gonna pretend. I was, but like
You're mean to me.
I told them that.
I think you'd be mean with empathy.
Yeah, like.
Don't try to cushion it. Don't try to cushion it. I think you could be mean with empathy.
You gotta be real.
So no, okay, I taught with a heavy hand, but it's because I cared about those kids and I knew they could do better.
Exactly.
Like I knew they were better than that.
Exactly.
And like I believed that to my core even when they didn't. I made sure they knew that.
There is nothing wrong with having high expectations and looking somebody in the eye and saying, no. This is the standard, and you must meet the standard or you fail. That's not, and you know what? I think that as long as you don't make people take just one path to get there, and you give them the ability to come to that conclusion with a free thought process, there is nothing wrong with putting that standard there.
And stirring their passions. I mean, I believe that when you go after your passions, or you get some type of ignition or of an excitement feeling, you are moving towards your purpose and what your calling is.
Yeah. One of the best reasons to be a teacher is to watch those light bulbs.
Yeah.
Like that's the coolest moment ever, to see a young person's light bulb go off and like know you helped them get to that point.
That is awesome.
It's the cool, like yes, teaching is like a terrible job to have in the sense that like the financial security is not there, and like the respect of being a teacher is not there in this country overall. But those moments make it so invaluable.
And so, Santa Clara University, we've been trying to get to your origin story for like 2 hours.
I mean, my origin story, it goes all over the place, right? So yeah, I went to Santa Clara
University, Jesuit school.
So yes, and going there, I freaked out at how expensive it was. So I tried to be a psych major for the first year, and because I thought
I was trying to psych yourself out.
Yeah. and I did.
It ain't this expensive, psych. No.
But like, there's this kid who like from like the transfer orientation since day one, he's like, yeah, I'm gonna be an English major, man. You get to read stories for homework. Yeah, sign me up. And that kept like the whole year I kept thinking about that one kid, and I'd see him every now and then on campus, and I'm like, he's reading stories for his homework. What am I reading?
And he was just happy reading stories.
Yeah, he was like, my homework's reading stories. This is great, And I was like, man, I want that to be my homework.
He didn't tell you he had to read 1,050 pages.
Yeah, or Chaucer 5 times. But I finally switched that back over to being an English major, and it was like an emphasis with creative writing, and I took this one class where I was like a tutor kind of to these other kids who were not English majors, but they're taking a life writing class for non-English majors. So I had this group of like 6 kids, they were like my age, and I was supposed to like lead them through the writing process, and it was pretty cool. And you could tell some of the kids just weren't getting that. Students. Some of the other students just weren't getting as like deep with it, right? Because really good writing is so hard to do, not in terms of the skill of writing, but because of the emotional burden you're letting go of. And this one class that we're having, this girl whose writing was not great, she just like rips her heart open and starts gushing about this issue she's having with her brother and religion, and she's crying, and then everyone else is crying, but we're all supporting each other. Because when you're writing, like you're sharing yourself, and that's hard to do, right? It's very like naked feeling. So we've already been supporting ourselves with the writing. So when we're having this deep emotional moment, we're still supporting one another. And I was like, wow, this is amazing that like I'm helping control this and like help these people help each other in this moment, right? And if I said the wrong thing or went about things the wrong way or had the wrong emotional reaction, it could be so damaging, right? But like I had the like mental emotional capacity to help this situation. And then from then on out, everybody's writing was better. And I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. Yeah. To help people get in touch with their emotions, which I guess is kind of the like psychology path I was thinking about.
It was definitely like sharing the vulnerabilities within that whole group and then connecting.
Oh, yeah.
Becoming more of like a tight-knit bond, right?
Yeah, but then also like seeing that like come out in your writing and this thing that you could actually use in your daily life, even if they weren't going to become English majors or teachers or writers. Like to be able to express yourself in written form is so important.
But to be able to express yourself in written form happens in every single place.
Yeah, it does.
Every single place, like in business,
your personal life.
There has been times that I've started letters. I have to write this because it's going to sound really corny. And so I just want you to read this, and you can throw it away when you're done, but this is going to sound really unlike me. And writing's very, very difficult. I think writing is one of the places where you can't hide, because you can't write something riveting, or like I've never been able to write something deeply emotional. I just haven't.
Yet.
No, I'm just not deeply emotional.
Yet.
No, I'm really not deeply emotional.
You know what though? This is part of my educator coming out.
I'm about as deep as a teaspoon.
You got to get rid of the word should, and you have to add the word yet to your vocabulary.
Okay. Yeah. Good luck. But I can write. I've written a lot of action scenes. I've written a lot of things. I've written a lot of scenes where people do bad things to people, and it's very easy, and it comes across really well. And really thoughtful and step by step and super detail oriented, right? But like, it's just certain things. Like I think we discussed it on our last podcast, where it's like I don't, I have the FHF, and forget his or forget her feelings.
Yeah, I love how you intentionally bleed yourself out.
Yeah. Well, good job. I'm doing a lot of self-editing here, so.
But we're discussing writing and communication. Communication is the most important thing. I've had a friend ask me, or not ask me, but she would tell me, I don't know where I want to go to, what degree I want. I'm like, why don't you go into something communication? Communication is valued in all aspects of our life. Sales happens through communication. Spreading through ideas is communication. Coding is communication. Media is communication. Teaching, communication.
Teaching is over communicating. No, and the majority of people in my family down south are educaters. And one aspect or
Texas or
Texas,
Puerto Rico.
Texas.
All right.
Educators. And so, like my cousin, my auntie, my auntie's retired. My other auntie is retired. Even my cousin, who's a basketball coach, he was an educator. Now he's just a
Technically, it's an educator.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think physical education is also something that's super important. From special needs to at-risk youth. Where my uncle runs at-risk youth program in Huntsville, Texas. Or I think it's New Waverly or Huntsville, Texas, but one of those small podunk towns. And they all are great communicators, and they're all in touch with breaking through the surface of people. And you know, I just hear stories of like the things that they put away. Even some of my friends, and like how like when I went to school, my mom would sit down and she'd be like, "Look, if there's any problem, we're gonna work this out. My son's gonna get a good education." And then I hear stories that they're like, "Well, why isn't my kid getting a good grade?" And it's like, well, like I knew that that's not something I could do, because I'd be like, "Your kid's not getting a good grade because your kid's not getting a good grade. That's pretty simple." Well, I don't understand. He or she gets good grades everywhere else. Well, I don't understand if he or she gets good grades everywhere else. Why isn't he or she getting good grades here?
Yeah, I gotta jump in. Usually monumental, and I gotta interrupt.
Okay.
I'm gonna make fun of you.
No, reason why, because like I said, I've watched your YouTube, interview video, right? And you were speaking about how parents and the school system should communicate more effectively. And then you also mentioned an online component where you are wanting the schools to be updated with their communication efforts with parents and vice versa. So it just struck the chord in me, I guess, or resonated that literally we're using this right now to communicate to parents and prospective students or what have you, to get to know, kind of like break down that, I guess, that communication barrier. So what are your thoughts on that whole communication realm between parents and the school system, and letting them know exactly what's going on with the curriculum? Why are the kids behind? Why are they, all these issues that I honestly can't foresee, but at least you would know.
So like, okay, just like you do with the kids, you got to present their education where they're at. You can't just be here and expect the kids to catch up to you, because you don't know where they're coming from. You have to go to them and see where they're at. The same is true with the parents. Like parents have so many different jobs and responsibilities and other things happening in their lives that you don't know about, that you can't just say like, we're going to have a meeting that's going to dictate the rest of your child's school year. It is going to be on this date at 5 p.m. and that's it.
Yeah.
That's incredibly unfair to so many parents who care so deeply about their child's education and happen to have a night job, or not speak that language, or not feel confident or comfortable walking into that school and not understanding what's going on, and not having the background of the same type of education themselves, whether it's in that same country or at the same time. Because even we're talking about generational, even just the generational differences that are happening in education, it's scary. It's scary. Like, parents flip out over Common Core. And it's because they don't understand it. It's not because Common Core is bad. It is not because the parents are dumb. Not at all. Neither one of those things are true. It's because they don't understand it, and it's not being explained to them.
So you said something earlier. It's like, you say 5 o'clock on this day, and then if they don't show up, imagine like they can't show up. Like I know I was always generous when I was people's bosses at like work, and they needed some time off for their kids. If you could basically say kids and time off for school, and it was just automatic. I don't care if I had to do your job personally myself for a few hours or whatever. But could you imagine not being able to make that, and how like the guilt you feel, or this pompous individual being like, well, they don't care about their kids, so why should I care about their kids?
Snap judgments,
Yeah.
Yeah, and not understanding what goes on in people's life. And I'm gonna tell you, in the Bay Area, most people work 2 or 3 jobs.
You have to.
And they don't have time.
You have to.
And like, I think that I don't have a lot, but I live a charmed life because I do what I want to do. And that's worth a lot in this world, because I've been there. I've worked 60 hours a week, and worked at clubs and bounced and taught martial arts. It's like had zero time for myself. And if I had a child at the time and I had to be somewhere, I'm not confident that I could have got that time off to be there. Or even worse, it's like you can't get off at a certain time and you show up 15 minutes late. How does that make you look? So let's say your kid,
Right.
let's say your kid has an attendance problem, and you show up 15 minutes late. They're gonna automatically assign that to you.
Yeah.
Well, of course the kid's gonna have a attendance problem because his father's not taking anything serious or not on top, or the mom's not on top, and it could be maybe your job just was being kind of horrible and wouldn't let you off at that time.
Yep.
And you know,
And like as an education, as an educator, you already have to think about that as for the kids. There's no reason it has to stop at the kids. You should think about that for anybody, and like everybody. And people don't. Like, everybody's got their own origin story, their own history, their own struggles that they're dealing with. And that's how you need to approach other people when you communicate with them, right? So whether it's the kids and you're trying to teach them about World War II or make them read The Great Gatsby, or it's parents who want to know about their kids' grades, the grading system, what kind of books they're going to read that year. The school that I taught in at a charter school in Boston for a year. And one thing that they did that I really liked was they didn't just have back to school night. They also had a back to school morning. So they had one day, the week of back to school night, where like a Thursday schedule, where classes for the students didn't start until noon.
right.
And that entire morning, like, kids could come and do study hall if they wanted to, but they didn't have to because their classes were going to start at noon, just like shortened schedule, right? And that whole morning, teachers were there for parents to just like come in when they could. You know, they could call and schedule an appointment, or they could just show up when they could. And like that helps students, parents feel more comfortable. It gives them a second opportunity. If they can't do the night, come during the day or the morning.
Right.
You know?
So who makes those decisions to have those type of programs?
So in a charter school, the school can make that kind of a decision.
How about in a public school?
In a public school, it's going to kind of depend. I think it's going to depend on the size of the school and like what district the school is in. A lot of it can come from the principal. And like if the principal can say like, hey, this is this thing we want to do. If they can figure out the hours with like the teacher schedules, and because there's like hours that the teachers have to work or like are allowed to work. And then there's the hours that students need to be in class. So if they can move those hours around to have that kind of a morning and convince that to the superintendent that, you know, this is an important thing that we need to do, then it can be done. And if they plan even like far enough in advance, the superintendent could even like tell the principals, like, we're going to have this extra day at the end because during the year we're going to have 2 back to school mornings, right? So we're taking those hours out and putting them on at the end of the year. So that's why we're ending school on the 25th instead of the 24th.
That makes sense.
But you can do those things.
But there has to be a will to do that.
There does. There has to be a will. There also has to be like the thinking ahead and the taking the consideration, the teachers and the like student hours, the hours the kids need to be in class.
Right.
But like it's doable. It's definitely doable.
So it takes work,
It does.
but it can be done.
Yes.
Yes, Scott.
No, I mean, when it comes down to it, maybe people may not agree on the specific tactics, but the overall end result is that the parents, the school board, the teachers, whoever, the students all want the same thing at the end. They want success. They want to be able to advance themselves a few levels. And it seems like that's where the route that you and other people want the school system to go towards.
Yeah.
Well, I said this before, and I know we've been trying to get to, you know, your college education for about 75 hours. But at this point, I'm down to abandoned ship. Where did you graduate from?
Okay. No, wait. Actually, okay. My graduate school story, getting in there is a good story. I'll make it fast, though. Don't interrupt me. Got it? Ready? You ready? Okay. So after I graduated college from Santa Clara University, I didn't know what to do with my life. I was working a part-time job at Stanford School of Medicine, the Office of Medical Education, doing like data analysis and reading student surveys. And I was like, hey, this is kind of interesting work. You know, maybe I can move like forward with it. After 3 months of them like walking people they were interviewing for my job only full-time, like walking past my cubicle, I was like, you know what? I can't with this. So I was like, maybe I should go to grad school. I like writing. Maybe I'll do creative writing. I should go to creative writing school. In the meantime, I'm like, I'm just going to get like a silly like retail job because I did retail all through high school. And I was like, I found a job at Equinox, the gym, selling workout clothes, really expensive workout clothes. So I was doing that job, just kind of like trying to figure out like grad school programs that I thought were interesting. It was hard because like I wanted to do creative nonfiction writing, but like no one does that. One day this guy walks in, he forgot his shorts, and he's like, if I go home, I'm not coming back to the gym. Just give me this cheapest pair of shorts you have. And he's there with his wife, and we're just kind of talking. And, oh, yeah, I just graduated Santa Clara, trying to figure out what to do. Maybe I'll go to grad school, or maybe I'll do this thing I just heard about. It's called Teach for America. Just do, like, some teaching while I figure things out. And immediately he's like, no, don't do Teach for America. Turns out he's a professor at Stanford at the School of Education. And he invites me to sit in on one of his classes. He's a professor of adolescent psychology, Dr. Amado Padilla. Mm-hmm. And he invites me into one of his classes. And never in a million years did the idea of applying to Stanford, let alone going there, cross my mind. Going to school, high school, across the street from Stanford. And I was like, nope, that is not my spot. Mm-hmm. That is not anywhere I will ever go. And he invited me into his class. So I was like, you know what? Why not? I'll check it out. If I hate it, whatever, at least I know. So I go and I walk in and I hear these people talking about they're talking about their students and like the theories that they're learning about. And not only did I find it really interesting, but one of the things that really struck me was like, they need my voice in this room. Because there's a lot of things that they don't understand about these kids because they didn't have a harder childhood like I did. And like there are things about their kids that I understand even though I've never met their kids, just because I was that kid. And it was like, if I was in this classroom with these other teachers, I would be able to share that with them. And we would all be able to grow and become better educators for it. So I was like, I got to apply. I got to try this out, So I looked into it a little more and I applied. And, one day Dr. Padilla comes in. He's like, have you heard yet? I was like, no. And he's like, you got in. And like
insider knowledge.
Oh yeah, I know, right? So like I ran into the dressing room, start doing a little happy dance because I didn't tell them I was applying to grad school and I wanted to keep my job in the meantime. Mm-hmm. And so yeah, I got into the Stanford School of Education because I sold the right guy gym shorts.
That is awesome.
That's a good story. Yeah. That's a good story. By the way, on record, that's the longest me and Scott have been quiet.
Correction. Oops. Blow my own ears.
What
as long as that growers stay quiet, and it takes a woman to make them stay quiet.
Calm down. Let's not be sexist.
It was a good story. Okay.
No, it was. I mean, it was. I think a lot of kids and adults go through that transition period of not knowing what they want, and they just kept on doing different things, and sometimes through serendipitous circumstances, events, fortune happens.
Yeah.
And it gave you the idea, okay, this is actually interesting. I want to lend my voice. I think I can contribute some type of new idea to this group, and lo and behold.
And part of it too was like the Teach for America thing. I had no idea what they were about. But again, I wanted to be knowledgeable. If I was going to go into teaching, I wanted to know what I was doing. Because if you just threw me into a classroom and were like, teach these kids, I would have froze. I would have been like, teach them what? Hi? Why are you? No, stop throwing.
No, stop, please.
Yeah,
no,
you can't. You have to be prepared to be a good teacher. You have to know what you're talking about. You have to know theory. You have to know practice. You have to understand. You have to have thought deeply about children and how people learn and learning science and psychology behind it. And you have to know these things. You have to have the tools in your belt if you're going to walk into a classroom and expect any kind of results.
Absolutely.
And one of the reasons why teaching isn't as highly valued as a profession is because people don't realize that. Mm-hmm. Everybody's had a teacher, so they think they can do it. Although everybody's had a doctor, and they don't think they can do that. Mm-hmm. But
teaching, anybody who teaches anything, people think that if I just had the knowledge that this person has, I could teach. And they don't understand that there's actually an art form to teaching anything. And to teach at a high level, and to be a master instructor, is just like being a master of anything else or any other type of art. It's super difficult.
Yeah.
And not only is it super difficult, But most people who are the most qualified for it don't want to do it
Yeah.
because it's just not, it's not fruitful.
It's okay, like it's not financially fruitful, but also the amount of emotional lift you have to do is incredible
Emotional lift in what ways?
in taking care of that many children. So
Yeah.
I taught in Richmond for 4 years. I was at El Cerrito High for a year and Richmond High for 3 years. And you're dealing with classrooms of 40 kids at a time who all have their own, like crazy things going on.
Right.
And Richmond's a little bit of a rougher area, correct?
It's a rougher, it's a rougher area. I liked teaching there because it did remind me of East Palo Alto, but it had like a large comprehensive high school. And the things that the kids are going through there, like I had this kid in my AP class, right? AP Lang, I think, right? So senior class, high level English class. There were 38 kids in this high level AP class. AP classes are supposed to be small, but there are 38 of them. And this one boy, smart, always does his homework, always on time. One day he comes up to me and he's like, "Miss, I gotta talk to you." So I'm like, all right, everybody's settling into class. I step outside and we're having a conversation. And he's like, "I don't have my homework." And I'm like, "What?" I'm like, okay, like that's fine. Like you can still get, like the way I did homework, you could still do, it was only reading homework and you could still get 80% even if it was late. What I cared about is that you did it and you understood it.
Right.
On-timeness is important too, but it has its places.
Where were you when I was in high school?
A twinkle in my mother's eye.
Yeah.
Oh, Jesus.
The rib shot. This is just horrible. All right. Please continue before you insult me further.
This young man, he proceeds to tell me about how the night before his mother's boyfriend got drunk and tried to beat on his younger siblings and his mom, who was apparently trying to recover from having breast cancer.
Wow.
And so this young man takes the beating for his mom, and he doesn't even fight back. He just lets the guy pound on him until the neighbors call the cops. And he comes to class worried about his homework.
Yeah.
Now multiply that times 40 and multiply that times 5 other classes you teach.
Wow.
That's what I'm talking about when I say emotional lift.
Wow.
Because that's what you are carrying. Now that's a kid who cared about his education. Imagine the kids going through that who don't care about their education.
So one thing I've always said is that even though I think that I didn't grow up with a lot, I was lucky because my pathway to go to school was always clear. So I didn't have to fight my way to school or fight my way back to school. I didn't have any person, wow, that was hard, at my house beating on me, besides my mom when I did bad things, but that's okay. But I didn't have anybody else who didn't care for me trying to harm me. And so I think people don't understand, and it upsets me because I understand having a conservative value and saying, look, you have to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. But you can't have a weird expectation for someone who cares enough about school to graduate under those circumstances. They should be applauded. When you see them, it's like, all right, you graduated, and what do you do for a living? Oh, I'm a clerk. I'm an assistant manager at Safeway. I'm a clerk at Safeway. Or jobs that people look at and they're like, oh, whatever, that's kind of a nothing job. You don't have to have this or you don't have to have that. No, that person's path to getting that job took more effort than your PhD. It took more effort because you were given such a clear path and you started on the yellow brick road, and this person's path was crap. Big, chunky pieces of crap.
That's why you can never judge people because you have no idea what they've gone through. And then it goes farther back than that because you have no idea what their family's been through either. Because the struggles that you have aren't just your struggles.
Right.
They're everyone around you struggles.
Right.
So my dad growing up during the Depression and having his dad die when he was 14, all that weight, I still feel because it was on my dad, you know? And
yeah.
It's not just about you, you know? So okay, this might seem a little random, but I didn't let my students use the R word, right? And I was like, maybe no one in this room seems retarded to you, but you don't know who they love, and you don't know who the people they love. And so you can't use language like that, because just because they're not physically in the room doesn't mean they're mentally or emotionally in the room.
I had no idea the R word was retarded.
Yeah.
I was so lost for a second.
I got you. That's why I did say it.
I knew it was like the R word. I was like,
I don't know, because like a lot of people who haven't had that experience don't realize how bad that word can be. Because like if you have family members in it or friends or neighbors, you see it happen, right? But if you're too far removed from that, you're not going to.
Well, everybody, like, also, like, I worked with adults with disability, and I was like I would read, so I got really confused because I would read some people's medical information. It would say mental retardation or retarded. And I remember I said, it's retarded. I said, no, you don't say that yet. And I said, but it's in their medical jacket. But, and it was just explained to me by a good friend of mine. He's like, that's old education. And saying words like retarded or the F word, fag, that's old education, which was totally acceptable when I was in 88, when I was 14, and you would say, like, I didn't even know, like, how hurtful saying something was gay to somebody until one of my friends came out of the closet to me, and he told me, and I was like, why did you wait so long to tell me? He said, well, you always said, like, fag or gay. And I was like, but, dude, I don't care. I'm the last person in the world to care how somebody wants to love somebody else. And he was like, well, I didn't know that because how you were talking. And I was like, I felt so bad.
Because you're using someone's identity as an insult.
And I didn't even, and then I thought about it. And I'm still cool with this person till today. And by the way, the person has a fabulous life, right? He's jetting all over the world doing stuff. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, damn, I should have paid attention to, like, the things that you were doing. And I feel really bad. But at the same time, he's still a 100% genuine person, and he's never, ever mentioned the N-word around me. I mean, you have to understand, being born in the early 70s and coming of age in the 80s, late 80s, with Ice-T, Luke Skywalker, NWA, man, the N-word, the F-word, that was thrown around freely. Like, it was cool, and I didn't even realize it until people who I really, like, cared about came out and said, like, dude, I thought you were kind of a different way. And I thought I was all cool and stuff, and like, nah. And there's like, nah, dude, you're kind of an a-hole. I'm really censoring myself. Right?
See, but like, this is why I love talking to teenagers about language.
Yeah.
And making them think. Like, when you think critically about an author and, like, the language that they're using in their book, also think critically about the words that come out of your mouth and when they come out of your mouth, too. And like, when kids start thinking about that and even, like, talking about that, there are, like, amazing changes that happen. So, like in teaching the Autobiography of Malcolm X, there have been schools and classes where we do have a conversation about the N-word. And we talk about it, like, the history of it, the etymology of it. We talk about it because it's part of language, right?
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but how far back do you go?
What do you mean?
To the N-word. Because...
like Mark Twain?
No, like Latin roots.
Like negus?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like back.
Because that was just if you were black.
Yeah.
That's just what you were called.
Yeah.
Because that was what, before Africa was named Africa without gold, it was negus. So it was really like, I wanted to flex my knowledge a little.
Good job.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. We're all better for that. That's why we have discussions.
I can read. No, but I always thought I always found it very interesting that something that's literally positive was made negative. And I think there's a struggle to make it positive again.
Yeah. And so, like, that's the thing. Like, when I teach, kids will try to ask me what I think, but I'm like, this classroom isn't about what I think. It's about helping you think.
Wow.
So you still have to make up your mind. So we would have this discussion on this word. And this would be the one time where I would tell them, like, yeah, I don't say this word. And you do not say this word in my classroom. But when you go out in the world, you got to make your own decisions. So, you know, I open up this discussion to these students, and they think about the history of it and, like, different contexts that could happen. And I think one of the most powerful things that was ever said was by this one student, this one Black young woman who shares with us that her grandmother taught everyone in her family that she did not get sprayed by a hose for anyone to say this word. Mm-hmm. And she's like, that's why we don't use this word in my language. And that, like, it's only one generation ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That was happening.
My dad was born in 44. Mm-hmm. And he was born in a segregated South. And so, like, he's super, super sensitive about anything that he perceives as racist. And, like, he's very uncompromising. He's like, because my attitude is like, you know, regardless, these people who are racist or who think a different way, I got to live here with them, so I got to interact with them. He's like, I ain't got to interact with nobody, because they were spraying us down. People were getting lynched. I went to Vietnam. I came back. And I was still not treated right. I don't have nothing to say to them. And I mean, like that. It's very important to understand that people of that generation, how hard it was before you. Like, I did not get sprayed with hoses, so you could say that. And I think a lot of ways, like my generation, the Generation Xers, we let the people in front of us down, because I mean, we've done some heathenistic stuff.
But see, that's why it's so important for, like, young people to be talking and to have them have conversations and have them have conversations in an academic setting, to know that the focus is to learn and to help them understand that, like, it doesn't matter who you are, where you come from, there is knowledge you can share. And there is knowledge that you will get from other people.
Yeah.
And maybe that knowledge seems like something in a book, but like sometimes it's personal history, like that one girl just shared, right? But that kind of personal history puts this context around the history you're learning in your social studies class, as well as the current events that you're reading about now, as well as this novel that we're reading in English class, right?
And it's super important, right?
Mm-hmm. And that's the thing, like reading that, you know, like learning about the civil rights in history, learning about, like, reading this book in your English class, those things don't matter if you don't give it that context of your life.
Yes. So, I think it's time for an intermission.
The battery's about to go out.
Okay, so we're going to take a quick intermission and change batteries.
Speaking about things I really wanted to comment on.
Yeah.
And I had to step away.
And we're going to come back and we're going to finish up this conversation. This is awesome. Boom. And we are back. And I had absolutely no idea where we left off. Do you know where we left off, Scott?
Yeah, we were talking about, like, the getting the students in the context of language. And so we're going to get into metaphysics.
Scott's metaphysics. Dun, 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 dun.
Theme music.
I truly believe, like, education itself is finding the convergence of ideas, right? So when we get into, like, some type of metaphysic talks, we're talking about how the word, like, when we use language, it's language is their ideas, but they're verbalized. And so words themselves create power. Mm-hmm. And words also create our realities. So when you go and educate other students, become more compassionate, to empathize with other students, of other people of different time periods, of different upbringings, social economic status, different cultural upbringings, you're literally getting them into the idea of that person, what they went through. Mm-hmm. And that's really only through the power of language.
That's why literature is so important. You know, like, I know the majority of people who take English classes don't become English majors, but like one of the biggest things that came out of Harry Potter was empathy. And I'll be honest, I haven't actually read any Harry Potter books. I'm like one of the 10 English teachers in the world who haven't. Mm-hmm. But I still definitely appreciate the themes of otherness that book brings out, and how kids have become more empathetic because of, there's been studies done, I believe, don't quote me on this, I've seen articles quoting studies on how like kids who have read Harry Potter, people who have read Harry Potter tend to have more empathetic tendencies. And the more literature you read, the more you're exposed to different kinds of people, especially if you're exposed to diverse literature.
Well, yeah, it's definitely, it's like a exchange of ideas. Exchange of ideas is technically like a what's it called? A psychological brainwave, particular imprint specific to that individual. So it's a transmission of information of what that individual has gone through, what they theorize, whatever they conceptualize.
Right now, everybody's wondering, what is Scott talking about?
But what I'm saying, it's transmission of information, of that perspective of that individual. So anyway.
So teacher brain though? Okay. So in the teacher brain, what you're doing is you're taking whatever someone is saying, right? And like, even if it doesn't seem to make sense on the surface, you're drawing from where you think that person is going with it. And you're trying to like remember the context of everything else that just happened, and you're piecing together and figuring out how this person thinks.
I don't understand you either. No, I'm playing. No, so
because there will no matter your class, there will always be this kid, I feel like this was you, who says these like out there things that everyone's like, what? But the teacher, the power of the teacher is to help everyone else in the class see what that kid is saying.
it was me who always said out there things.
I believe that too.
Yeah.
I believe that too, right?
Yeah.
So like a good teacher is going to take your out there idea and like add the context of what is happening to demonstrate to the class that like you are still contributing. Like maybe you said something that seems out there, but you are still thinking critically about the topic we are discussing, and you are still contributing like value to it.
Right.
And like just because you had a different pathway to that thought or idea doesn't devalue your contribution to the conversation.
Definitely. Well, actually, no. Teachers actually made fun of me when I said certain things. Like I've always had an idea, and I've always thought language was very interesting. I thought that how can one noise that somebody makes with their mouth means something totally different to this culture and that culture? And when I said that, they were like, "What is wrong with you, you sixth grader?" But I had been exposed to different languages, right? So, you have people who speak French or Spanish or Creole, Tagalog or Cebuano, and you're like, for instance, I always didn't understand. This is what always freaked me out. So in Thai, the word drunk is Mao. Mm-hmm. But the word for no is meow. Mm-hmm. Now those sound exactly the same, except a little different inflection. And I was like, how can that be possible? Well, in Thai, pakwan means sweet mouth, or somebody who sweet talks people. Mm-hmm. But in Tagalog, pakwan is watermelon. Mm-hmm. It's the exact same word, the same pronunciation. And so I always just...
Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah, I always just wondered, I'm just making words, sounds with my mouth. I'm just I'm making ape sounds right now, just with my face. And they're like, I totally understand that. Because if I go and I speak English to someone who only speaks Spanish, they're like, kind of sounds right. Or to someone who speaks Russian, they're like, I have no idea what he is talking about. Maybe I killed him. I don't know. So I just always thought that was fascinating. I never said brainwaves or anything like that because I'm not Scott. So
well, Scott has a different way of processing things and coming to conclusions, and that's fascinating and that's awesome.
Yeah, not only that, me and Scott actually agree on 99% of the stuff he talks about metaphysically. But I agree that it is incredibly enjoyable to make fun of Scott when he says it.
Well, I really believe that communication brings us together.
Yeah.
Yes. Or separates us.
Or separates us. We're a social species, and through our diverse point of views, with empathy, brings us together.
I would argue more that it's the lack of the communication or miscommunication that separates us. Because I feel like if you truly are communicating, even if your communication disagrees, that doesn't necessarily separate you. if you've communicated a disagreement well. Whereas if you're not communicating your disagreement well, that's more likely to separate you.
And this is going to bring us into my issues with education.
Let's go.
And so I said earlier that if I could wave a magic wand, I would totally redo the educational system. And every time I've said this or anything like this to an educator, they've looked at me and said, first of all, thank God I'm not an educator. Thank God I'm not in charge. But second of all, nobody would ever do it because it's difficult, and my ideals would never come to fruition. So first
Anything
of all,
worth doing is difficult.
so first of
Someone
all,
said that. I don't
I
know.
would not let any kids take any standardized tests until they were 16. Because if we have a self-esteem problem in our country, there's no better way than to beat on somebody's self-esteem by telling them that they're going to fail a test and they're not worth anything. So that was one thing, and I don't think it should be even like freshman year. I think like 16-year-old, where, I mean, I think that there should be a test that you have to know these certain things to graduate, and that's okay for a standardized test to do that. But a standard test usually, I don't want to create a bunch of kids and a bunch of people who are good at taking tests. I would like to create a bunch of people who are good at thinking about problems and solving the problems. I believe that our lack of critical thinking is why we can't even address problems anymore in our country, like climate change, like infrastructure. I mean, let's not even talk about climate change because that's really big. Like, that might take the whole world, and we're not going to do it, so we're doomed anyway. But let's talk about something like we could do, like infrastructure in our country. It's a very big problem, but since we're not problem solvers anymore, we did infrastructure in the 50s, but we were problem solvers. And now we've kind of beat the problem solving out of us. And I think one of the ways we beat the problem solving out of us is with participation trophies. Because, like, when I was told that I wasn't good at something, I had to go find something that I was good at and worked at. And it didn't mean that I quit trying to be better at, like, soccer. I tried to play soccer my whole life, and I've been pretty horrible at it. I'm better than I was at one point. But it meant that also I looked for things that I was good at, and I solved my issue, my personal issue of doing something in, like, with a group of people. Because, you know, when you play these group games, you learn how to work with each other. I knew I wanted to do that, but I found other ways to do it, like football or basketball. And so soccer and baseball wasn't my things.
And that's okay.
And I'm okay with it not being my thing, you know?
I think one of the, like, most important things that I ever taught kids was how to fail.
Yeah.
Because if you don't know how to fail, like, I don't know how you think you know you're succeeding. Because, and the thing is, too, like, the only way you succeed is by failing a lot of times and getting up after each time. And if you let one failure, like, set you back, you'll never go anywhere.
Yeah. If you let failure set you back, you ain't going.
Yeah.
I failed getting out of bed this morning at first. I was like, five more minutes.
You didn't go anywhere.
I'm just a prisoner in my house. Another thing that I think, and this is all goes into my remaking it, is
But like what you're talking about with the standardized tests, there are a lot of, I'm not going to be able to name them off the top of my head, but there are countries that don't do testing until, they definitely don't do it in elementary school. And I don't think there should be testing or homework in elementary school. Learning should be fun and exploratory and amazing, and an experience.
Yeah.
I understand why there are standardized tests and different types of reasons for having them, but overall, they don't prove anything.
And what are you learning from homework?
In some ways, you might be asking the wrong person, because I stopped doing homework in 5th grade, and I got bad grades in math in 7th grade because my problem of the week, I would always say, like, I just used logic. I didn't learn anything in that section where you're supposed to write about what you learned.
Yeah.
And I'd get 98% or higher on every test and then just not do my homework. And the thing is, it depends on the homework.
But in general, the task of taking your work home with you is teaching you how not to have a life. So is that really right?
So there are instances where you do need to know how to do things on your own. You know, like when you're applying for colleges or when you're applying for a job, you have to do your homework. When you're trying to figure out something about the world, what's going on in the world, reading the news, trying to find credible sources, that's doing like citizenship homework.
But I look at it, and I've always looked at it as homework is teaching people how to work over 40 hours a week.
Oh, and I am not disagreeing with you.
And then you just die when you're done.
So as an English teacher, to me, what homework meant was reading. And recording some thoughts about what you read to get kids in that habit of like, when you read, it's not to complete the reading, it's to think about it and to process what you read. So the only homework we ever had was reading and the journal that went with it.
Right.
I think the only other good usage of homework would be if there was an assignment that you were working on in class or some project or something that you're doing in class and you needed extra time on it. Like this is just something you like to take your time with. You don't understand right away. You had to talk to a couple peers to like get to the certain point where you could work on it. And then you just need extra time to work on it.
So let me clarify.
That makes sense.
I don't have a problem with projects.
Yeah.
Taking extra time. But
homework for the sake of homework? That shouldn't be a thing.
People are getting homework for the sake of
They
homework
are.
because the system says you must have homework.
Yeah.
So tonight, sorry, Scott, that was almost your voice. Tonight, class, we're going to go the pretest, not the test, but the pretest to chapter 7. Well, let's have that filled out tomorrow, and I'll collect those. Why do you have to do a pretest to chapter 7?
So, like, okay, again, I had issues with homework and math, right? Because I got the things right away. And part of that was probably because I was in a lower math than I should have been. Because the determination on which math lane you went on was a timed multiplication table test. And just because I couldn't do multiplication tables, like, fast in my head, did not hinder my ability to understand algebraic formulas, right? Like, those I got right away. Multiplication, give me a second, right? Remember that math teacher was like, you'll never carry a calculator with you. I'm carrying like a basically supercomputer with me all the time, right? Like, this thing has more technology than the first rocket ships did.
You'll never carry a calculator with you.
Yeah.
Wrong. Like, I love when just situations like that, and it's just like, you're absolutely wrong. So
when it comes to math, the math concepts I understood right away. For the kids who didn't, they needed to practice working through the problem. So in my 7th grade brain and my current educator brain, it made sense to me that those kids who wanted and needed more practice got it. And got it outside of class if they wanted it, you know? If there wasn't time during class to do that extra practice that was going to help them, you know, wrap their brain around the concept and be able to continue doing it and continue the work the next day in school. To me, that made sense.
Okay.
But since I understood the math, just like in taking it in and doing it in class that day, I didn't feel like I should do homework, so I didn't. So this is 7th grade me, who was very shy and quiet.
Shy and quiet, but I wasn't doing that homework.
You stuck firm to your, I guess, principles, right?
Yeah.
Logic.
Yeah, I did. You know,
know why? Because she wanted to watch The Simpsons.
That was on Sunday night, okay?
Oh. Seinfeld.
I don't remember when that was.
Okay. So I have a problem with homework for the sake of homework. I do think projects are appropriate. I think that projects, especially projects that involve you getting help from other people, you should always have to do.
Talking to other people, interviewing people, researching,
getting your parents to help you, just eliciting resources that you may have around your house or in your neighborhood to help you. I think that's important. I think that any participation trophy should be burnt.
Yeah, I'm not big on the participation. I can't even say it right now.
Yeah.
I'm not big on those either, because like, I think it is important to acknowledge work and effort that a kid did, but if they...
Yeah, that's a check. See, like when I did work and effort, and I got a check.
Yeah.
And the check let me know that you're not there yet.
Yeah.
But you did something.
Yeah, well, you know, it was like, hey, look, I noticed that like last week you were really struggling to write a paragraph, and this week you wrote 2. It's not the full 3 paragraphs that we needed by this Friday, but I think it's like amazing that you are pushing yourself. I see the effort. I saw you ask like Jose some questions, and I saw you working with Carrie the other day, and those are great steps to take to get towards that. Now the thing is, you know what, if that kid can't get to the 3 paragraphs that week, that just means he has a different learning about writing process than the other kids in his class. That should be okay.
Yes.
You know, even though the assignment that week is to write the 3 paragraphs, if everyone else is coming from a background of writing 2 paragraphs and this other kid is coming from a background of writing 1 paragraph, from him, or like 2 sentences, for a kid to go from 2 sentences to 2 paragraphs,
it's
while
amazing.
everyone else is going from 2 paragraphs to a 3 paragraphs,
So
that's harder work.
A lot harder work. But so what you're saying, and also you don't know what the kid's going through, so the kid might actually be dyslexic. He may actually be working through dyslexia, and you may not be privileged to know that because you don't really have to know that because it's his medical issue.
So there are like, as a teacher, there are like IEPs and like where you do have to know about those kinds of things because you have to provide materials to make the his or her education accessible to them. So like regardless of whatever like disability they have.
So here's an interesting question that just came up. So have you ever like found a kid who wasn't diagnosed and helped them get help?
I haven't had that experience. I mean, I've worked at a lot of schools that did have pretty good special ed resources and students who were diagnosed, and there were like, you know, like I did have the IEPs for them, and they did seem to like match up.
Yeah.
And like, because I mostly worked with older kids too, a lot of the times their IEPs, if anything, were outdated, and the kids didn't need as many supports as like they could have received. So it was actually kind of awesome to be able to like push them even further and beyond the scaffolds and things that they needed.
We were trying to make you a superhero just now. And not only that, but she found people who needed help and helped them.
But you know, the thing is though,
Cast
like,
your vote.
Regardless of like an IEP or not, like kids are going to think about things differently, or like, you know, there might be a word that you think all the kids know, but this one kid had just never been exposed to it.
I used to hate.
Right? Like, that's not that kid's fault. Like,
I used to hate that. Somebody say something, I'd be like, I don't know what's going on. Let me try to write this down. I write it down all messed up. And, you know, we didn't have the internet, so I had to go get a dictionary. And you write it down wrong. That word ain't in the dictionary, so I had to get the word that was close to it because I don't know how to spell.
I don't either. I'm terrible at spelling.
Get my stuff together. But so are you ready for the bomb of the education reform that I would always say?
Go for it.
Okay, so number 1, at the age of 15 or 16, kids should be able to choose either A, if they really want to go to school and continue on to school. They should be able to continue on to like a program that you're in, like middle college. That's why I was smiling so much. I didn't really know about it, but a program that you're in middle college to excel them and get them ready, like a college preparatory program to get them ready to go to college. And it should include college level work, because I think it's ridiculous that we have people who are going into college and still spending 2 or 3 years doing rudimentary work. And it's just exposure. If they were not ready for that and they still wanted to continue with a regular, you know, college track, maybe they need it more, or maybe they, you know, and I think it has to be a situation where their family, school board, and maybe even an association, you know, of people who actually care, all work together to determine like the path that would be best for these kids. And so maybe you stay in school for another 2 years. Maybe you go to like an accelerated program or a college preparatory program, or what you would call middle college, so they can go on to school. Or maybe they would just go straight 15 or 16 years old and go straight into a trade school, which there's a super need for trade workers. The average trade worker in California, when I did my research, was 48. And don't quote me on that number because I did it about 3 months ago. But I know it was close to 50, which means that in 10 years, because trade workers retire early. Trade workers don't work till 65 or 70. The average trade worker, especially if you're working in a heavy trade like carpentry, you might be out at 55 because of disability and something like that, you know, just because it's a hard job. Those jobs should never be looked down upon. Those are jobs that are necessary
Yes.
to make the country work. And I think it's like
In our rush to like tell all kids that they can go to college, we devalued trades
we devalue trades.
and vocations and vocational schools, and like we never should have done that. Like we should encourage kids, like, yes you can, but like not just that it's okay to go to vocational school, but like we should equate that option. Like I had students who just weren't into academics, but they really wanted to work with their hands. And I had this one student who he felt he was dumb. He was always told he was dumb, but he really liked working with his hands and was interested in carpentry, and his family did carpentry. And I was like my students knew I went to Stanford. They knew I came from a background like theirs, but still like went to Stanford, right? And you know, like I would tell this kid, like, you understand that if you go to trade school, you will not have the debt that I have, and you will make more than double what I make way faster. And he's like, but you went to Stanford. I'm like, yeah, but I teach. like yes, I have a master's degree from one of the best like colleges in the country, but as a carpenter, you will make so much more money than I will.
Kid walked away like, man, what a waste of Stanford. You're supposed to be balling when you leave Stanford.
Yeah, no.
And so I would say that instead of looking at, like, first of all, no standardized tests. The standardized test should come at, like, 15 or 16 when the kids are deciding, ready to go on. And look, there are some kids who I knew. I know a guy I went to high school with. He was ready for college at 16. I mean, he was going to junior college. He's going to community college or whatever, the junior college, or we called it. He should have just been allowed to go straight to college. It shouldn't be some special thing like take this test. Look, can you do college level work or not? You can. All right. Do you want to go to college? Go to college.
Have you ever heard of Sir Ken Robinson?
No.
He's got some great TED Talks.
You asked me to look it up, and I
Did I?
Yeah, like we had a conversation.
Yeah.
Our pre-talk. He said, "Oh, you should look it up and this, that," and I was like, I have too much to do.
Well, sometime when you get a chance, he's not only is he know what he's talking about, but he tells it. He does it in a storytelling way, And one of his TED Talks, one of them is called "How Schools Kill Creativity." That's like the most famous one.
Yeah.
And it was very like inspirational to me in becoming an educator. But there is one part, I can't remember if it's that talk or another one, where he brings up the fact that we package students by year that they were born. And like, why? And then the thing is too, like you're packaged in that year you were born for all subjects. Why?
And the time of year you were born.
Yeah.
It's so weird.
Right? It is because like the thing is like the year you were born, the time of year is not going to dictate that you will know this much English at this time, this much math at this time, and this, et cetera. Which is the same as like every other kid. Like that's not how brains work. No. Like after I graduated grad school, I was in Albuquerque for a year, and I was working with an after-school kindergarten program and subbing middle and high school. In this after-school kindergarten program, I think kindergartners were really interesting to work with because at that young age, development happens at such different paces. So I have this like one girl who is like yay high and very babyish. Yeah, like lower than the table. Very babyish and cute and like, still like trying to figure out her ABCs.
Right.
And like another girl in the exact same class who's like almost my height and like eloquently expressing her vivid emotions. And like, why are those students gonna have to be grouped together for the rest of their lives when they're on different developmental paths? And this is in no way like an insult or like degrading the girl who was smaller and younger and like still learning her ABCs. Like there's nothing wrong with that. Right. And we've placed too much value on the speed of understanding things and how much you understand at what point in your life. We've
placed value on the speed of understanding things, but haven't placed value on the critical understanding of the things we want done fast.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think it's on purpose. I mean, like, you've said a lot of things like I was never told about Africa. I was never told about the Middle East. I was never told about Asia. I was told about Asia, but never told about Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
Where have our last wars been? Africa, right? You know, I mean, we had conflicts in Somalia, right? We have conflicts right now in the Middle East, and before we had Vietnam War. You know, what do we learn about Latin America? We had Panama. I think that if you start educating people, and education brings empathy to the people who live there, especially when you understand the history and the great history of it, it makes it very difficult to carpet bomb those people. We learned a great lesson in Vietnam because we started seeing Vietnamese people when the monks burnt themselves. Like, the people just burnt themselves on the middles. They're like, oh, they don't like us. And so I think it's purposeful. I also think that the lack of critical thinking is purposeful, because I know kids in South Korea, they start learning critical thinking at about what we consider the 4th grade.
And you can.
Yeah. Well, also like most Americans, we actually got our critical thinking and our social interaction from playing with people from outside. And when you were outside and you were gone, because I remember when I was young, my mom would be like, get out the house because I can't stand you. And I would run the streets and run wild and do like kid things with my friends. And
Have you heard of outdoor kindergartens?
No, I never heard of outdoor kindergarten.
So there is a movement in some places. There are some outdoor kindergartens where pretty much kindergarten doesn't take place in a classroom. It takes place outside.
Dude, that must be awesome.
Yeah, and the kids
Except when it
learn
rains.
by being outside. Oh yeah, they're outside too. I think.
They learn how
Don't
to learn how to get under shelter.
Yeah,
No.
or maybe they learn how to build it.
You know, but think of the critical thinking skills that you have, because you are making decisions, and your decisions are instantly giving you feedback.
But then also think about how much more aware you are of your surroundings
Yeah.
when you have to learn from your surroundings. And your surroundings aren't just like 4 walls and a roof and a floor, right?
With
When you-
fluorescent lights.
Yeah, which are the worst. But
Yeah.
like when your classroom is trees and plants and animals and insects, you know, crawling around and making noises and doing things, like that's how you should learn about the world, is looking
Yes.
at it and listening to it and asking questions about it.
And imagine how much people who learn like that will want to conserve.
Yeah.
I mean, so there's certain things that like get grouped into like liberal politics that are actually used to be conservative politics. Like conservation itself is a conservative politic. like Teddy Roosevelt started the national park system, and started these lands that you would have forever. People who think like something super liberal, like conserving animals. Well, hunters are some of the biggest proponents of like, yes, when you hunt, even if you're harvest. Well, you say you harvest a pig or harvest a elk. You're gonna harvest an adult elk who's like spread his genetic material and he's older now, not a young elk. And so it's just interesting how things shift like that. And I think if you just really think about it, a lot of things can coincide together. One of the things that really struck me when we had a conversation earlier is that you said, which we haven't talked about, you running for office. So we're gonna have to give you a big plug sooner or later. But you said, so one of the things that really impressed me was that you said, we're having a civil discourse, and I was like, word.
Yeah.
I was like,
Civil politics.
y'all ain't calling people horse face, and
No.
you ain't throwing stuff in.
No. It's been such a, in some ways, especially like with the political landscape of the nation currently, it's been so like reassuring to have these local politics happen in such a friendly manner. Like amongst all so there's 9 people running, 3 of them are the incumbents, and all the new people, we've kind of bonded in some ways. Like I feel like regardless the like outcome of this election, I still want to like keep in touch with and like hang out with some of these people.
Wow.
Because like or at least like check in on what they're doing in the community, and trust that we'll all still be doing things in the community whether or
Right.
not we get on this board.
Okay.
And I think like the 6 of us kind of have this agreement that like we almost don't care which one of us like wins. We just want to make change and think we need new people there.
Okay, so first thing you would do if you could.
On the school board?
Yes.
Oh man. So like one of my ideas on being school board is that like we need like evaluation at the top. Like so many times we talk about like teacher evaluations, right? But I have a lot of trust in teachers. Teachers make miracles out of nothing.
Yes.
Right? So, and then they also, they get paid nothing. They're given nothing, right? So there are people in other positions higher up in the district who get more. And so I want to make sure that they are the most efficient.
So how would you evaluate them? Would you evaluate them with like a 360?
So what do you mean with 360? Like,
360 evaluations where your peers and the people under you evaluate you?
I'm not sure. Like I'd want to look into, like I'd have to look into like what all the different positions are and like what their duties entail and like how those duties affect students, right? Because if you have a position that is not affecting the education or the safety and well-being of the students, why is that position there?
So you would actually evaluate positions to see if they should be eliminated.
To see how necessary the positions and the, let's say they're, what's it called? Contractors or, not contractors. I'm totally blanking on the, people that you like, consultants, there we go.
Consultants.
Yes, like consultants or other like programs that we may be paying for. I want to make sure that those are worth the money because I know that teachers...
consultants tend to be very expensive.
Yes, right? And I know that teachers are worth the money. And I know that para-educators and teacher aides and school duty, school yard duty people, I know that those are worth the money, right? And the cafeteria staff and the janitorial staff, I know those people are worth the money, right? So the people who are directing things and managing things above them, I want to make sure they're worth their money.
So do they all currently receive evaluations?
I don't think so. And I know that...
Hold on a second. What?
Right? Not that... I don't think so. I'm not saying that they do or don't.
But
I don't think they do. I know that the superintendent should be evaluating the principals and the school board kind of evaluates the superintendent. But I don't... From what I've heard... from people who have worked in the district, I'm not saying this is or isn't happening, but from what I've heard, that's not happening either.
So you would want to actually do an investigation to make sure that things were right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because, like, the thing is, like, I think whenever anyone jumps into a new position, you shouldn't just start doling out changes. You need to, like, sit back and listen and, like, see what's happening.
Okay, so.
And, like, I think that's why the evaluation aspect is so important to me. Like, I need to see what is going on exactly. Because there's, a lot of school board meetings are behind closed doors.
Right.
And there are things that no matter how much I could try to involve myself, I'm still not going to know. I don't work for the district, and, like, I don't know what's happening behind those closed doors.
So you won't know until you're actually there.
I can't to some extent. So, like, I know for a fact the first thing I'm going to want to do is find out.
Why do school board meetings, why do they have to be behind closed doors?
There's parts of them. I talked to a person I know who's on a school board, who was on a school board in another county. And one thing that they told me was that there are things that need to be discussed behind closed doors because sometimes they have to deal with lawsuits or litigations. And so, like, you can't make that public information.
Yes, okay.
So, like, and that makes sense to me. I get that.
I'm going to seem very skeptical here.
Go for it.
It seems like you could talk about things behind closed doors like lawsuits or litigations, but still have a large amount of transparency about what you're doing with the other stuff.
Yes.
See, to me, whenever anything's behind closed doors, there's a problem. Nothing happens behind closed doors that's good for people who aren't behind the closed doors.
And I think that's why the community is so upset and people want change.
Or people just don't know that it exists.
Yeah.
And
to be fair, I think even if the incumbents do stay in their position, I really, really hope that they have heard the community this time and do become more vocal and do share more information and make some of the changes that the community is demanding. And that's kind of what I mean by like everyone, like all the new people who are running, who I've talked to and like you know, had conversations with, like, we don't want people to win this position. We want the kids to win.
I think it should probably be a law. I have very poor faith in people being transparent. So the one thing that I always said is that if I had anything to do, like if I was in charge of money, I would give money freely as long as I had 100% transparency. Mm-hmm. Because I know everybody comes up against budgets, and budgets are the most daunting thing. There's never enough money, never enough money, never enough money. I don't understand how there's never enough money. We've been playing lotto for years. But, I mean, I guess that sounds like a layman's way of explaining it. But that's how lotto was sold to us. Mm-hmm. That's how gambling was sold to us, that we're going to let you gamble. And we're going to... You weren't around, but I was. Our schools win, too. That was the lotto. I think you were like -7 years old when that came out. But just saying, I mean, I think that's the biggest thing. Because I never trust anything that's done behind closed doors.
Yeah. I'm very wary of the things that happen behind closed doors.
Okay, so number one, you would evaluate people.
Yeah.
Number two, maybe a little more transparency.
Definitely.
That's.
I mean, communication is like the second part. You know, I think that's also like what the community wants is like, okay, even if you've made decisions we don't agree with, will you at least tell us why? And tell us immediately. Don't tell us like months and months. Like right now you made a decision, why? Because the thing is, I think parents and teachers and like the community, part of it is they're not feeling respected when they're not given the reasons why decisions are being made.
Can't they just update a website or something? Like it's not. It just blows my mind because it's not hard. Like I'm sitting here like spitballing, like I'm gonna solve the world's problems, but like you could make a Facebook post and say,
and there is a Facebook page, but not a lot of people interact with it. So like I went on the Facebook page and like, you know, like I do see people that I can't remember how many people follow it, but there's not a lot of interaction on it. So like, you know, like there aren't people like necessarily liking or commenting things. And that kind of interaction could bring the community together if they had that.
So is there actually
there are posts.
There's posts.
There are posts.
Yeah. Are the posts meaningful?
The posts will be informative of like things that are happening.
So there's information there.
There is. Well, and it's fairly new, but again, like people aren't interacting with it. So like we need to find out like why aren't people interacting with it? Like what can we do differently that people would interact with?
Gotta go viral.
You know, like so often going viral is a bad thing.
No,
I'd rather not.
No, please don't go viral now. Please.
Yeah. I mean, if it's like a going on Ellen and getting money for the school's viral thing, that's
viral.
I'm all right with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do that.
We'll cover it. We'll film the behind the scenes. So what's the future? What's going on? What do you have going next?
For me?
Yeah. How's the campaign trail? Is it a grind?
Oh God, I keep going back and forth between this like, oh my God, why am I doing this? And like, you know, like a lot of people are like, oh, this is totally something you can do, and you're qualified and you're smart. Like, I like not to sound like not modest, but I know that I can do it. But like,
well, you did a poor job of not sounding modest there.
But like. It's still like feels like it's such a huge responsibility, you know? And I mean, like being a teacher is such a huge responsibility. I mean, like I bet anyone right now could just think of that one teacher that said that one messed up thing that still sticks with you and you've probably brought up in therapy, right?
I don't.
Or
therapy. I'm broke.
Wherever.
No.
Your version of therapy.
My version of therapy.
Whatever that is.
So I actually, believe it or not, I don't really remember my bad teachers.
That's good.
I remember the teachers that have changed my life. And I'm friends with one of them to this day.
That's awesome.
You know, and the other one.
And that's the teacher you want to be remembered for.
Yeah. You know? No, like,
I think saying that motivational, inspirational thing.
I can't tell you what he said to me because it's profane, but his name is Mike Galisatis. He was my jazz band instructor. He was my community college jazz band instructor. And he was the first person as an adult I left the country with. My jazz band played in Japan, and we stayed there for a few weeks, if I remember. He was just no nonsense. He was great. He was compassionate, but he was just like, well, either you're going to do it or you're not going to do it, dude. It's up to you. I'm not here. I am not here to make you practice. I am not here. You don't practice, you're not going to be in the band.
You got to let kids make decisions. You got to trust kids to make decisions because they will.
Yeah.
And when they make the wrong decisions, they don't need you to tell them.
Yeah.
They will figure it out. And if you give them that freedom, they're so much more empowered. They're going to learn from it so much deeper, and they're also going to respect you as an adult a lot more because they saw that you respected them as a person.
So who was that educator for you?
I mean, I would definitely be Paula McAvoy, my middle college teacher.
Paula McAvoy.
Yeah, and on Facebook she endorsed me, which is cool.
What?
Yeah. But she was so excited about whatever she was teaching. Yeah. And she didn't see any kinds of lines or barriers for like any of the students in the classroom.
That's awesome.
And
she just seen students.
She just saw like possibilities.
That's dope.
And she was always so excited to share the things that she was sharing. So like even if you weren't excited about it, you wanted to make her happy. You didn't want to let her down,
She was on that hype train, huh?
She was. And then she was also so creative with things too.
Right.
It wasn't just like read this book, and then memorize this stuff and here's this test. Like I'm pretty sure it was her class. Like we had this test on like we were having this like existential philosopher unit, and we had to I think in my test instead of just like telling you what like certain philosophers believed, I think my test was I wrote like a play of the philosophers talking to one another. And like how would they interact with each other with these like philosophies that they had. And like that takes so much more brain power and such a deeper understanding of how they thought to be able to complete that task than like circling in B on a Scantron.
Yeah, that's pretty dope, actually.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, isn't that amazing?
Yeah. How about you, Scott? Who was the yogi or the Raji that changed your life metaphysically?
Mr. Hill. He was my English teacher.
Yeah.
And
English
was teacher, yeah. So I was in AP English. I didn't want to be there.
I never took AP.
I never wanted to be there.
I taught it, but I never took it.
It wasn't bad at all. And so I was failing that first semester. And he approached me one class afterwards, and he said to me, "I can tell that you don't want to be here." And I was like, "What do you mean you can tell?" He's like, "I can tell from your body language." And my whole plan was to fail so I can go down to a lower English class. That was my whole game plan. But it didn't work out that way.
Hey, Scott, that was not a good game plan.
It almost worked. But then he said, just stick with it in here.
Cared.
He cared.
Ah, shucks.
He said, stick with it and just try for me. Just try. And so I did, and I was like, all right, whatever. He talked to me. He took an interest in me, being in that he wanted me to I guess to succeed. Yeah. When I wanted to be like, no, I want to take it easy. And so during that event, I actually ended up getting like an A- in that class.
Look at you.
Still didn't really apply myself as hard, but I did apply myself with my attention and my focus.
Yeah.
So that's the one teacher that I remember the most.
All right.
Kids just they need to be heard and seen, and you don't need a participation trophy to be validated. Sometimes saying that you didn't do this right is a form of validation.
So I have one last gripe about school districts when I was young. And this is it, and I'll be quiet after this.
No, you won't.
Yeah, I know, I'll never be quiet. So I remember when I was young, they started this weird policy that if someone's picking on you and you defend yourself or you get in a fight, you both get suspended. And I remember saying, that doesn't make sense. Why? If this guy comes up and he picks on me, and they said, well, you both should be punished, so you won't want to do it. I said, yeah, but he doesn't care about not going to school because he hates it here.
That's why he's acting out.
I like it here, and he's picking on me, and I'm not just gonna take this butt whooping, right? And I think that like, look, I know that you cannot encourage anyone to fight. I mean, I'm sure it's liability and all types of stuff, but by having a policy like that, you take someone who doesn't care, and then you take someone who probably cares. And you tell the person who cares, well, if you really care, you're just going to get beat up.
So, like
I've never cared enough just to get beat up.
That goes back to my story, though, about that kid who took that beating for his mom and then cared about his AP homework. Like, if anything, like, he didn't fight back at all, and that's almost what impressed me the most. And I had to tell him, like...
You lightweight told him to fight back, huh?
No, I didn't. No, I told him that I admired him. Because, like, it takes a different kind of strength to restrain yourself like that.
Well, you wouldn't have admired me because I wasn't restraining none of you.
But, like he had the whole thought process of, like, he didn't... Like, one, he didn't want to get in trouble because he didn't want the cops to pull up on the moment that he was hitting back. Two, because, like, needed to go to school the next day, right? Two, he didn't want to set an example for his younger siblings. And, like I guess he also, like, knew his own strength and that, like, he could take the punches. And, like, I don't know. Like, apparently the guy was drunk. Maybe he wasn't hitting very hard or something. But, like...
But it's a problem.
Yeah.
It's a deeper problem than
that.
Yeah,
for sure.
Well,
but, like there is... Yeah. You have to, like, understand... Like, each situation is so...
Different.
You know? So, like, for this kid in this situation to just take these hits... I think that was admirable and respectable and, like, amazing and courageous. And, like, and I had to tell him these things.
Yeah, it was a testament to his character.
Yeah,
as
but,
well.
It was. And like, it kind of made me think about these other situations where kids do fight back, right? And, like, are there ways to defend yourself without having to throw a punch? And I think, like, I'm just starting out with martial arts stuff, right? And I feel like a lot of the things that we're teaching, like, being taught is, like, how to get away from the fight.
Violence is seldom the answer.
Yeah.
But when violence is the answer, it's the only answer. And that's very hard for people to understand.
I think it's hard for people to understand when it is the only answer, because I think people come to that conclusion way too quickly.
Yes. But no, I'm not going to say that. Look, if you could walk away, if you could skirt away, if you can avoid the situation, like... But if it's the only answer, you're going to have to do something to help yourself. And that's just how maybe I was raised flawed, I'm old. But I'm telling you, it's like, I never understood it because there was a kid. First of all, this kid was like, I feel bad now because telling the story, it's going to sound like I'm making fun of him. But this dude was like in the 6th grade and he should have been a freshman. He was just... he was older. I had like a beard or something. Man. He was big. And he was picking on me.
Yeah.
And I was like, you need to stop picking on me. Please. I was always polite. I said, I would appreciate it if you stopped that. And he wanted to eat my candy. But do go eat my candy. So, I had my little chocolate-covered almonds. Chocolate-covered almonds are expensive. And my mom buy that for me. And mom working like 2 jobs. And you're going to eat my chocolate-covered almonds. So I'm like, all right, whatever. You eat my chocolate-covered almonds. I'm not just going to give it to him. No, it don't happen. Next day, where my almonds at? Like, all of a sudden, he's deboing me out of my almonds. And then if I don't give it to him, he going to beat me up. So the next day, I put some X-Lax in those chocolate-covered almonds. And let him go in and say, here you go, homie. Those your almonds. And then he ate them, and it was like the super strong ones. Because he, like, crapped on himself. And then I got in trouble. Because they said, what did you do? I said, oh, you always ate my almonds.
So like, my question was, like, where are the adults in the beginning of this situation?
In the beginning of the situation, I said, dude ate my candy. And it was like, oh.
That's where the problem started.
And
that's where the problem started.
And you're dealing with someone who's going to, anybody who knows me, I will take matters into my own hands very quickly.
But like as a child,
Yeah.
in that kind of a situation, you shouldn't have to.
But I didn't.
I know, no, like it still happens today,
Yeah,
right? It
yeah.
does. And like a lot of times it is because schools are understaffed
Yeah.
and teachers are often undertrained.
What no, I think it is that the people who are important aren't getting the resources.
Yeah.
And I think that certain administrators could be getting resources that the people who on the ground level, like to me, the ground level is always more important.
Mm-hmm.
It's always more important. Like you go into any organization, okay, put it this way: you walk into a supermarket, and there's lines out the wazoo, and you got 3 managers sitting in the office, and lines out the wazoo, and you look at those managers and you're like, okay, I know you guys have an important job, but it's 3 of you.
Yeah.
3 of your salaries equal 5 people down here.
Yeah.
Why don't one of you stay out there and we get like 3 people down here?
Start bagging some groceries.
Help us out here.
Open up another register.
And it's not that simple. And by the way, I've been a manager at a supermarket before. A lot of times it is that simple. Like I know people are like, oh, well, you don't understand what we go through. No, actually, I do. Sometimes it's that simple.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're sitting up there in the office, and you've had a long day, and you're like, no, I ain't going down there. And then you have to debrief your next manager and your other manager. The right thing to do is go down there and send an email. We had email back in the 90s too, and send a message. You guys go down there. I'm gonna send this message, and you read this when you're done. This is what you got to do. A work list works just as well as verbal communication, but it's easier to tell somebody something than to type something out. But a lot of times it's like that. A lot of times we know what the problem is, and a lot of times the problem is simple. Like I don't know how many administrators are like in a school now, but I know, like I don't know, like I was talking to somebody and they had like 5 vice principals out of school. Is that real?
How big is the school?
It was a pretty big school.
Like how many students?
I don't know. He told me it was a
So
large
it
school.
depends on that.
But
And like the thing is though,
I guess if it's thousands of kids, that's
yeah, no, it like principals and assistant principals or like deans on campus can be very, very powerful backup for the teachers. Because if the teachers are not getting that support through an admin, it's hard for anything teachers say to kind of stick and for like kids to believe. Because like if a kid is acting up and if a kid needs some space and they need to not be in that classroom, they need somewhere to go and someone to talk to. And if you only have like 2 or 3 admin in a school of 1,000 kids, there's nowhere for that kid to go. Because if you have that many classrooms, having like a kid who just needs somewhere else to go and someone else to talk to and have a conversation with before they can get centered and their mind right to be back in a learning mode again, like you're going to have lines out the door.
They just don't.
But if you have 5 admin balancing the duties, like, you have that one admin who's talking to parents in the community and you have the other admin who's dealing with scheduling and this kind of paperwork, you're going to have more admin who are available to do backup with the kids and the parent and the teachers.
So how much and I guess this would be my final question, because this is what I'm really interested in. As a teacher, and maybe as an administrator, do we create busy work for teachers that they shouldn't be doing? And,
Yeah, there are schools that do.
And
Not all schools.
but there are schools that do that.
Yeah, there are.
So, I mean, I think teachers teach. I think that's what they do best. That's their passion. Obviously, they're not doing it for the money. I think we've established that like 35 times. Obviously, they're not doing it for the prestige because, and by the way,
In this country, at least.
by the way, in France, I'm a teacher. You teach young kids? Oh, you're an artist.
Yeah. In a lot of countries, it's up there with doctor, engineer, and lawyer.
Yeah, why would it
Or
not
higher
be?
than lawyer.
Yeah. Everything's harder than lawyer. Why would it not be, though? Why would it not be valued? You're actually educating the next generation.
Yeah.
My thing is that I think we need to start removing tasks that cause busy work for people. I think it's impossible. You have all this busy work. You have this task. You have to check. Maybe you have to check boxes. Maybe you have to do this or that. If you remove that, I think that we remove barriers for education.
So in my current job, I write curriculum. And the curriculum I write goes to 300-400 schools all over the country, and it's free. And one thing that's cool, like when I stepped out of the classroom, I wanted to help support teachers and make it so they're, because the most, like, people get so scared about computers in the classroom and curriculum being on computers because they're like, oh, they're going to get rid of teachers. Oh, no, 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 no. The reason why I have curriculum that, like, we've written and put on a computer is because that means the teacher gets this with the kid.
Right.
And more of that one-on-one, face-to-face human connection and interaction,
you're using
because
technology.
they've been
That's great.
freed up to be able to do that. And, like, the mentorship is, like, the biggest part of this, like, curriculum that we give. And so, like, a lot of, like, parents or communities would be like, oh, they're on the computer too much. No, there's research. Like, instead of carrying around hundreds of pages of textbooks everywhere, everything's on their, their Chromebook or whatever.
That makes sense.
And they're growing up with technology, so it is normalized.
Yeah,
Yeah.
But you have to understand, people are saying they're on the computer too much. Like, that's just because they didn't have computers.
But what are they doing with it?
Yeah,
That's what are they just watching YouTube videos of, someone making funny noises for like 5 hours on end? Or are they actually like watching documentaries and reading articles and like, reading online books?
Yeah, it's so funny because at my last job, I was allowed to go online whenever I wanted, right? I worked for a startup. I just hit the mic. And so like, one guy, he's a coder. He's watching a YouTube, like, I think he was watching, like, Ren and Stimpy, which I like that, right? Another guy's watching something. They come to me, what are you watching? And I'm like, I'm watching a documentary on the Nile River. And they're like, you're weird. Like, because we were allowed downtime. But, I think this was excellent. I really, I've met you before, but I really didn't know you. I really got to know you, and I hope that this conversation was at ease. And I hope you enjoyed
this
it.
was nice. This is a lot less stressful than like a forum or a formal interview. It's kind of nice.
That's because my pre-production was trash, and that's my saying. My pre-production was trash, and I didn't really have great questions. But next time we'll be back to draw ya.
I mean, I feel like it was still like informative, and
Yeah.
a lot of times we don't know, like why people get into the positions they are, and everybody's got their own background story that like leads them on this path to where they are and what they do and why.
Well, I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you.
I want you to come back and see us again.
Yeah.
I want to do a mentor special where we have maybe when we decide how to film more people.
more than 3.
Yeah. Well, we can do like up to 4, but it's dicey.
5?
Yeah,
And this person's claustrophobic.
And I would just like to have people like just talk about like the mentors in their life and something uplifting. We'll wait till it's a really dark time in the world and we'll put out something nice. But thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Right, and so you are.
I'm Stephanie Fitch.
And you are.
And I'm running for Ravenswood City School Board.
Excellent. Good luck.
Register to vote November 6th. Get your vote on.
Best of luck to you.
Thank you.
We hope to see you again.
Yeah, me too.
All right.
All right.
So, God, I got to say it, huh? Should we say it even on an educational thing?
Yeah, you don't got much time, though.
Education should be fun and happy.
All right. Have you tried happiness?
Grab your slice today. See, I almost forgot it.
That was just horrible. All right. Boom. We're out.